Good afternoon. I'm Chair Sue Oliva, and I'd like to welcome all of you. We've got a big crowd today. This is great. For our May 2024 Historic Resources Commission meeting. The HRC is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by North Carolina general statutes, the City of Asheville's Unified Development Ordinance, and Buncombe County Ordinance. We are authorized to hear requests for certificates of appropriateness for alterations, demolitions, new construction, and other work within historic districts, or for the alteration and demolition of historic landmarks and other duties, including preliminary review of subdivisions as specified in the ordinance for the HRC. I will now ask commission members and staff to introduce themselves, and please speak into the microphone.
Amy Moxley, architect.
Xander Ellenbogen, architect.
Celesta Gorman, interior design.
Sue Oliva, historian.
Will Hornaday from Albemarle Park, local historic district.
Maria De Sassi, architect.
Annie McDonald, architectural historian.
Shannon Watkins, realtor.
Jenny Bowen, Buncombe County Special Collections and Local History Preservation person.
Alex Cole, HRC staff liaison. Madeline Stone, planning technician. Janice Ashley, legal advisor to the HRC.
We will consider the minutes from the April 2024 meeting of the HRC. The minutes include findings of fact and conclusions of law. Are there any corrections?
I'd like to make a motion, if there's no corrections, that we approve the April 10th, 2024 minutes and findings of fact and conclusion of law.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now begin the evidentiary hearings for the items listed on the agenda. As a quasi-judicial proceeding, the HRC is not setting policy, nor are we soliciting public opinion on the desirability of an application. The HRC hears and considers evidence presented and applies the standards set forth in the guidelines and the standards of the specific historic district for that application. The HRC must make its decision upon competent, material, and substantial evidence to determine the facts of the hearing. The HRC will use judgment and discretion to apply the standards contained in the relevant guidelines to the facts. The commissioners, in voting for an item, will not have a fixed opinion not susceptible to change, have a conflict of interest, have engaged in ex parte communication regarding the application. Rules for speaking. This meeting is open to the public, but participation is limited to interested parties who wish to provide commentary or testimony regarding the proposal. We'll now move to our first public hearing. Oh, sorry. For everyone who'd like to speak, would you please come forward and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information you present during the hearing for a certificate of appropriateness or preliminary subdivision approval before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. We will now move to our first public hearing item.
Thank you, Chair Oliva, members of the Commission, for being here today. The first item before you is a preliminary subdivision approval request for 209 Cumberland Avenue. This one is pretty quick. As far as my presentation goes, I just have one slide. So per UDO standards, when you're looking at the at preliminary subdivision approval request, you're looking for subdivision of lots that would allow for new development features at a minimum to be built in a manner that is congruous with the special character of the historic district as it relates to building setbacks, orientation, and consistency with the historic development pattern. And if you note on my staff report, under my recommendation, there's also a second reason that's pulled from the, it's kind of funky because we use the standards for new construction just to have a way to cover existing structures that are on existing lots being subdivided. So there is there are two historic structures on the parent parcel, which is on the right-hand side of the plat on the slide. And the new lot will be on the left or on the corner of Flint and Cumberland, and will be vacant. And just down on the left is the historic plat for this site. So it looks pretty much identical to what's being shown. So I'm not noting any concerns on this one. So happy to answer questions if you all have any for me.
Any questions for Alex?
Alex, is there any information on that driveway at the front of the property? Do you have any documentation on that? And, do you know if that will eventually stay or go with any proposed new development?
It's an existing driveway, and so it will be there. If somebody wants to modify it, they'll have to get a certificate of appropriateness for it. And there are standards for driveway cuts in terms of maintaining the rhythm of driveway cuts along the street. So that's something we would be looking at for sure if they wanted to change it.
Do we know if that circular drive is a feature, a historic feature that is part of the Rumbaugh House property?
This isn't the Rumbaugh House.
Oh, not Rumbaugh House. Which that is part of the historic property?
Yeah, it's called the Frederick Rutledge House.
Rutledge,
I
not
have
Rumbaugh,
no
thank
idea
you.
if the driveway is at all historic.
The reason I ask is because, with any future development that we review, we'll be looking at it on that parcel alone. And obviously, the driveway will not have any historic association with any new development that will occur, but it is historically associated with the Rutledge, not Rumbaugh, I'm sorry, didn't remember. And so is that a factor that we can consider with a future COA application?
I mean, I think you can consider alterations to the existing driveway as part of a future CA application for sure.
Okay, and how it relates not to the subject property at that time, but to the Rutledge House?
I think there would have to be some demonstrated evidence that it's historic to the site in order for that to be a relevant factor in decision-making. I'm
Okay.
not sure how we would determine that. I guess we could try to look into that, but probably our means of understanding that are probably...
Historic aerials would be one way to do it, perhaps.
Perhaps. It can be a little bit challenging sometimes with the older aerials, in part because the imagery isn't so clean
Yeah.
to be able to see through the tree canopy. But we could certainly try different ways to see what we could learn.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Alex?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to make any comments?
I'm Scott Dedman. My wife couldn't be here today, but we are the owners for the past 34 and a half years. And thank you for considering our application.
Just a second. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Dedman, just out of curiosity, are you going to share the driveway then, or are you guys going to block that and just each have your own kind of half circle?
Well, as to the new property, the smaller part of the part that we will not own, I think that will be up to whoever buys it between them and you and the regulations. We have discussed a hope that we would be able to bring a not circular, but it would be almost U-shaped with a new curb cut. And I've looked closely at the trees. There's a nice line of trees of hemlocks that we've preserved very carefully for almost 35 years. And there's an area that would be the right distance off of the new property line to request a new curb cut, and we would have to remove 2 of the smallest and youngest hemlock trees on that row.
Do you know how long that existing driveway has been there?
I have a photograph, or I've seen a photograph of the front of the house in 1900,
Okay.
the year that it was built. And there are no trees anywhere in the yard, and now there's a small forest of trees there. The driveway has not changed in 34 and a half years since we bought the home and moved in.
Does the driveway appear in that historic photograph, or is it difficult to tell?
No, it doesn't. And the driveway, there's a little bit of asphalt paving in front of the house, but I would say 85% of that entire driveway from Cumberland Avenue back to Cumberland Avenue is gravel.
Okay.
It's not a brick or paved driveway.
And you won't be developing, you'll be selling the lot separately? Okay,
That's right.
okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll open the floor for public comment. Is there any public comment? I will close the floor for public comment. Ready for the motion?
I just want to point out that I think when we get an application, a COA application for new construction in the future, that the existing site features need to be very carefully considered, and how they relate to the new property versus the Rutledge House. And, I hope that any buyer will be fully aware of all the requirements, not just for review of new construction, but review of site design and site planning as well.
Okay. Any other comment, commissioners?
Hearing none, I'm ready to make a motion if there's no other comments. Chair, based upon the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, application, 3 pages, Exhibit B, proposed plat, and the commissioner's actual inspection and review of the subject property by all members, I move that this commission approve the preliminary subdivision approval based upon the following. 1, that the application is for subdivision of existing 1.05 acre parcel into a new 0.627 acre parcel containing the existing structures and a new 0.44 acre vacant parcel in accordance with the attached plat. All work will be completed in accordance with approved and attached drawings and plans. 2, the standards for new construction, primary structures found on pages 92, 93 in the Montfort Historic Design Review Standards adopted April 14th, 2010 and amended December 14th, 2016, and the Unified Development Ordinance Section 715.1 were used to evaluate this request. 3, this application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. A, subdivision of lots would allow for new development features at a minimum to be built in a manner that is congruous with the special character of the historic district as it relates to building setbacks, orientation, and consistency with the historic development pattern. B, new lot with existing structure will retain its congruency with the historic pattern in terms of building, orientation, setback, retention of green space, and spacing between structures. 4, the actions and improvements proposed in the application before us for a preliminary subdivision approval are congruous with the special historic character of the Montfort Historic District. Is there a second?
All in favor? Any opposed?
Based upon the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a preliminary subdivision approval be issued.
All in favor?
Aye. Was there a second on that one? Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alex, ready for Chestnut Street?
All right, thank you. Next item is 122 West Chestnut Street. The next 4 items are all for certificates of appropriateness. This one is for aluminum metal picket fence in the front yard. The house is shown on the bottom left. As you can see, there is an existing privacy fence. That was something that was approved by staff recently per the design standards and what they allow for side and rear yard fences. I think it looks, I've gotten a couple of people ask me about it. I think it is pretty exposed because the parcel next door is vacant and it has been for a long time. So it is pretty visible, but that just is what it is. So anyways, the existing portion of fence is pretty new. It was recently constructed. They also want to fence the front yard, the perimeter of the front yard. I did receive a site plan from the applicant, which is shown on the slide, but you can view it in your packet as well. The applicant also submitted today some additional photos that I didn't really have a chance to look at them, but we added them to the folder, so I'm not sure what year they're from, but they do show there was a while back a chain link fence around the perimeter of this property. Fences are always debatable in Montfort as far as front yards go and where they have been considered appropriate and not appropriate. There is, I will say, there's the house right immediately to the right that you can just barely see part of the fence in the photo. That house also has wood privacy fencing around the back and metal picket fencing in the front. And when we pulled the file for that, that was approved back in 2012, and it predated the existing standards that require all fences in front yards to be considered by the commission via major work. So it was something that was back then approvable via staff level review. So I just bring that up because I'm sure that will probably be mentioned by one of you all if you went by, or anybody else who might have comments or questions. I am, for that reason, feel like I don't have a strong opinion on this fence, with the exception of the fact that most of the time when we're talking about enclosing areas in our yard, it's for the purposes of privacy, obviously, and pets and kids and whatnot. And sometimes that just doesn't work for a rear yard, but in this case, there is a pretty substantial rear yard that's already enclosed by fencing. So that would be the one thing that says to me, I'm not wholly supportive of fencing the entire perimeter of the yard. And I'll just defer to the applicant to explain to you what they're after here with the proposal. So do you all have any questions for me?
Any questions for Alex?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Got your,
Sorry,
obviously.
Alex, one question. The brick house that's, if you're looking, it's to the left, there's like a brick wall in front of it. You can see it in some of the photos, I think, that were mailed today. And maybe this is a question for the applicant about just more information about what's happening over there. Yeah, it looks like a brick, like a low brick retaining wall. I'm just wondering if it goes across in front of the house.
On these images, is that what you're?
Here. Exhibit B, I think.
Oh, no, that's on the other side.
That's on the other side,
Yeah,
okay.
there's a little private alley between this
Yeah.
house and that multifamily structure.
Oh, it says multifamily, okay.
Yeah, and so that little wall is on the property. that.
on that property line.
Yeah.
But does it turn the corner there and then go like right next to the sidewalk? It does, okay.
The wall,
Yeah,
I don't know, I didn't pay attention to that because it doesn't have any relationship to this fence, really.
okay.
Because there's a street in between them, so they're not like connected to each other, if that makes sense to you. It's a private alley, so feels more like a driveway, but there is but we can pull up street view if that's helpful. So your folder is here with all of your documents, and then there's also obviously my slide, whichever.
Thank you. Hello, I'm
Hi.
Tim Quillen. I am the owner of 122 West Chestnut. Any questions for me, or do you want me to? I can go a little bit further into the explanation for why to fence in the front. Part of it is just to be in keeping with our neighbors, which she mentioned is across the empty lot that's between us. They have, right beside of us, they have the wooden fence with the black metal fencing, a 4-foot metal fence in the front of theirs. Our neighbor across the street has a 4-foot black metal fence. And it's not as much of a privacy thing as it is a security thing. We have a small dog, rat terrier that is very quick. If the door was open and she got out, we're steps away from West Chestnut, which has quite a bit of traffic, and some people move pretty quickly on West Chestnut. We also have small children in our family, not us ourselves, but our family that will be visiting, and my mother-in-law will be coming, and she has dementia, and we want that little extra added layer of security to stop her from just continuing to go if she was to step out for some odd reason.
Questions for the applicant?
I just wanted to acknowledge that I thank you for describing about the fence. Our task is with the standards, how the fence applies to a
Correct.
neighborhood that leans towards fences weren't intrinsic and should be an open landscape more. And the creep of fence, your neighbor has one, you have one, then we can create a kind of that's how we have to look at it, just to give you an idea of
Okay.
what's going through our mind during the application. And the house that was built in 2012, Alex, was it built in 2012? Is that when the application, the one next door that you looked up?
Somewhere right around the same time with this.
So that was built new before the fence standard kind of came in. And your house is a Richard Sharp Smith
Right.
house that a fence may add a layer of distraction from the historic district of the historic house. And I don't know, it's a direct match with the style of house, which is talked about in the guidelines and fences and walls. But that's just to give you an idea of what we're going to kind of talk about as a commission.
Any other comments, questions?
I would like to share with my fellow commissioners that the fence is greater or less than 65% solid. It is 4 feet in height. And I don't know what, for a property of this type, a house of this simplicity and angularity, and it doesn't have, with all due respect, the architectural elan of some of the more robustly Queen Anne style houses in Montfort. And so a very straightforward metal, powder-coated black metal fence of this nature seems to me to be appropriate and congruous with the style of the dwelling, and its features and finishes. And the fence meets the guidelines. While fences are discouraged, for, reasons based in the historical landscape, the argument that they tend to present a visual barrier, where is the language? I can't find the language immediately. A greater visual barrier could be made with a solid row of bushes. So to me, this is a transparent fence that, because it is black, recedes from view and is less obtrusive than the very easily approved, administratively approved, solid fence in the backyard. So I would be inclined to vote for this because to me it meets the design standards.
I agree with what you said.
I agree as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further comment? We have a motion? No? Oh, public comment, I'm sorry. Do we have any, open the floor for public comment? Is there any public comment? Close the floor for public comment. We have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion as soon as I queue up the motion template. And make sure I have the correct one. Is this the right one? Yes. Madam Chair, based on the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, the application, Exhibit B, photographs and project description of 4 pages, Exhibit C, the site plan received May 1st, 2024, Exhibit D, additional photographs of subject property received May 1st, 2024, and the commission's actual inspection and review of subject property. I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness based on the following: that the application to install a 4-foot tall black aluminum picket fence around the perimeter of the front yard, or is to install. All work will be in accordance with attached and approved drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence. The standards for fences and walls found on pages 36 to 37 of the Montford Historic District Design Review Standards, adopted April 14th, 2010, and amended December 14th, 2016, were used to evaluate this request. The application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. The new fence will be metal, no taller than 4 feet, and no more than 65% solid. The new fence will be sited in a location that is compatible with the historic relationship of fences to historic properties in the district. The new fence is compatible with the historic character of the neighborhood and the architectural style of the house. And I will add that because it is painted black, it visually recedes and creates less of a visual barrier between the public way and the dwelling. That the action and improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the Montford Historic District.
All in favor?
Second.
Sorry, I'm rushing. Do we get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Based on the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued.
Second.
Was that second?
Second.
Amy said second.
All approve?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. Thank you. Rolling right through this.
Yeah, they run out of paper.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 19 Rosewood Avenue. The application is for a new addition on the rear elevation. So just a couple of, I've got a few slides here for you. The parcel map just showing the location, photo of the front elevation of the subject property, and then the existing and proposed site plans on the bottom. There is on the back, on the rear elevation, there's an existing deck and patio, and so those are proposed to be removed, and then the new addition constructed and a new deck constructed as well. So existing and proposed front and rear elevations, as you can see, it's a little one-story, 310 square foot addition that will just come off the back corner. It is per the standards inset just slightly from the rear building corner. There's no dimensional requirement. It just says that they have to be inset or should be inset from the rear building corner. So it is offset a little bit. And then you can see it's kind of a little bit funky in the straight on elevation, but on the left-hand side is where the deck will come off of the left-hand side of the rear, and then there's a basement door in the middle. So there'll just be kind of this little space that goes between the deck and the addition, so that one could walk through there to get to the door. Existing and proposed side elevations. And here's some perspective renderings. So I'm generally in support of this application. I do feel like it's overall not overpowering to the structure or anything like that. My concerns that I've listed in my staff report more so stem from proposed material. So one, the proposed siding material is fiber cement shake siding. So two things. I've not come across a one-story addition like this, or an addition period, that didn't carry the same siding material as the primary structure. And as far as the same floor, so this house does have shake siding, but it's in the half story versus the first story, which has lap siding. So to me, that looks a little bit funky. There is the standard that says that, shouldn't carry the same horizontal plane. So I guess one could argue that having the siding differentiation does help with that, but it looks odd to me. But and the other thing is that the commission has always required for historic buildings to use authentic materials, so wood. If the commission is amenable to whether it's shake or lap siding on the addition, it should be wood siding. It's kind of hard to, hopefully you all had a chance to kind of really sit with these drawings. There's something a little bit odd about the little dormers that come off. So if you're looking at this straight on, you can kind of see the roof line of them. But at first I was like, well, I think I can get my head around this, but I think what's throwing it off for me is the window placement within them. They're not typical of where a window would sit within a dormer. So I just thought it was kind of strange to me. So there's like not a break in the roof plane below, if that makes sense, where the windows would sit. So it just kind of the windows are on the flat plane, and then there's no change below them. So it's kind of not really a true dormer. So anyways, just something I noted as a little bit unusual. And then we had concerns about the proposed window specifications, in particular, and I'll let Cecilia, the architect, designer is here to talk about to answer any things that I've noted here. But the product materials list identifies clad, but the manufacturer details identify an all wood product. And the commission has always required all wood products for additions to historic buildings. So just want to make sure we get clear on that detail. And then we did ask for a few different items for review as well. Railing detail, material for the deck, the pedestrian door and crawl space door specifications, the landscaping plan, and dimensions for the skylights and the lighting specifications, if there are going to be any that are placed on the door, adjacent to the door that's going to be entering into the kitchen. And so just to go back to the fenestration for a second, there is that existing set of triple set of windows on the rear elevation on the right-hand side. Those are going to be reused on the side of the addition. And I think I meant to note this in here, but one of the other things that I thought was a little bit different about this were the transom windows above the set of 3 windows on the rear-facing portion of the addition. I've not ever seen transoms that had divided lights like that. I think maybe if they were just single light casements or something, I could probably get my head around that, but it's kind of, with all the multi-lights, it's a little bit different looking, but that's just a design perspective, I guess. So the applicant did submit some additional information today that's in your packet. I had not had a chance to review any of the last minute things that came to me today, so probably just need to sift through that and see if you all have any questions for me about those or anything else I've mentioned.
Did we receive any information on the treatment of the foundation for the addition?
It's going to be stucco, I believe.
It'll be
Yeah.
stuccoed. Okay. And the commission's historic or, tendency to require wood siding on an addition, what is that based in? Do you know off the top of your head what that unwritten requirement is?
I think they've just been considered to be the most appropriate materials.
Okay. And do you know if there's ever been discussion about what it means to be compatible?
I mean, we don't know. I mean, we don't usually have full-on philosophical debates at most meetings. We're really just talking about kind of like what is appropriate and what's not, and what meets the standards and what's not. And I guess that's up to everyone's interpretation, not just mine or one commissioner, So
Because the standard is specifically about compatibility with the existing material. Select exterior surface siding and details that are compatible with the existing building and material, texture, color, and character. And I love the way that guideline is written. But that's a philosophical thing. So that's just why I'm asking. Has there ever been discussion among the board members about what it means to be compatible?
I think it's just generally been the MO of the commission to consider traditional materials as compatible with historic structures, so non-fiber cementatious materials.
Okay.
And the commission has not allowed clad windows, fiberglass doors, clad doors, or anything like that on additions to historic structures. It has been allowed for new construction for like a new house or entirely new building.
Okay.
But thus far, that has not been the philosophy of the commission as far as their interpretation of compatible materials.
Okay.
Does that help? I mean, it doesn't mean that the commission can't change their mind over time. It's just the way that it's.
Yeah, because it seems that a differentiation of material composition is one way to better differentiate new from old, or an historic addition from a modern addition, over time as that addition ages. So that just kind of philosophical debate that I've heard elsewhere about the appropriateness of modern, new materials on additions is something that I've seen come up in on other commissions.
Sure, and I think that's true with the Secretary of the Interior standards. It's just that the standards for Montford for additions specifically kind of take it a step further. They don't talk about differentiating anything except for the horizontal.
They do on page 88, where it says, although designed to be compatible with the historic building, an addition should be discernible from the original building. But again, that's a should, so that's fine. But I will stop berating you with questions.
No, it's okay. I guess it just goes back to the question of the philosophical debate.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, is the word discernible and differentiated the same? I mean,
that's a good question. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, again, it's up to each individual commissioner to make their interpretation of what is compatible with the historic structure in this case and any other case, obviously. And so I'm just telling you I can only tell you what has been carried forward with me for the past 10 years, just based on the previous 15 or so years of director time with this commission. So,
thank you.
Sure.
Any other
What
questions
else?
for Alex? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ready? I'll let you guys drive, of course, but if I can help, all of your application files are here on this tab, and then my presentation is here, so whatever's easiest for you to use, but I'm happy to help you navigate.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I'm typically all thumbs with tech, so I'm going to keep my hands off this. Hey, everyone. I'm David Farron, Joel David Farron, the owner of 19 Rosewood, along with my spouse, Emmy Brawley, who unfortunately couldn't be here. I just want to make some brief introductory comments and then turn this over to Cecilia to really get into the details.
Could you speak
Could
into
you
the mic?
come up to the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
So is this better now?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I just wanted to acknowledge your role in this important process. We've been stewards of historic properties in other locations and really appreciate all that you do. We're very thrilled to have bought a house in Montfort 8 years ago. We met with staff back at that time. I'm sure you don't remember, but have been thinking about this for a very long time in terms of trying to balance our needs with the neighborhood and the character of this house. So we've hired an architect who has significant training and experience in historic structures, and we're also planning to use a builder, JAG, that has worked a lot in the Montfort area. So really want to approach this thoughtfully and just have one specific area where I have a little bit of expertise based on my background, and that relates to the tree canopy on the lot. So there's a large white oak on the back right as you're looking to the back of the house that is part of a large white oak tree canopy, very significant, that extends on into Riverview Cemetery. So we've cited the addition to stay away from that oak tree and not compromise the roots, and we hope that by downsizing the deck, it'll not only be more in keeping with the historic character of the house, but also safeguard that tree, which is probably about 100 years old. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and otherwise turn it over to Cecilia.
Hi there, I'm Cecilia Smith, the architect for 19 Rosewood. Just to address some of the things that have come up today, the addition was very carefully cited so as to avoid the tree that David is referring to is right here, if you can see where I'm pointing. So we located the addition essentially in between the setback of the property, the access door to the basement, and the actual dormers, which I'll get into, were located as a means to avoid impacting any of the architectural features of the rear facade. This existing dormer, as you can see, the roof that is connecting to, let me see if you can see it in this elevation better. Yes. So right here, this roof has been dropped, not only so that it's on a different, the eaves are not intersecting, but also that we can avoid this rear dormer. As you can see in this dash line, we are just avoiding the overbuild roof. So, we don't have a lot of space to work with as it is a pie-shaped lot. So essentially it's cited to avoid any kind of existing mature vegetation, trees, or architectural features of the home. These dormers, Alex is correct, it's not a true dormer in the sense that the windows are elevated over the other windows, but it is such so that we can maintain the same head height of all windows in the addition while still dropping this roof so the eaves don't intersect. In regards to the synthetic siding or the fiber cement, my clients are perfectly fine with going with all wood siding and shingles if necessary. We also plan to go with all wood windows in order to match the salvaged windows that we will be intending to salvage from the rear elevation, these guys right here. The transom windows of the rear elevations for the proposed addition, if those were to need to go to a single light, we take no issue with that either. The railings are intended to be all wood railings with a 2x6 top rail, 2x4 intermediate and bottom rails, and 2x2 pickets with a square wood lattice below the deck to grade. We're currently starting an estimation process and will provide the requested material specifications for the crawl space door as soon as we have those. It is also possible we're evaluating the mechanical needs of this addition right now through the estimation process. And if we were to need an HVAC unit to service the needs of this, we would intend to put it on the north elevation of the existing home next to the chimney. Let me see if there's a good picture. I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing, but essentially it's right here. It's not visible. We would put a square lattice partition around it in order to block any views from it. And let me make sure But I think those were the major things to address. If you guys have any questions for me at all, thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for the architect?
Thank you. When you say replace the transom with a single light, it's the same shape, but it's just a single plate of glass?
Correct. And that was per Alex's suggestion. The intention of having the divided lights, and that was to please the committee with matching the pattern. So if that's not happening, we can revise that.
I guess what I was saying was like I don't think there's, I'm not saying, I think it's.
It's a full sash.
Yeah, we're talking about these guys right here.
Well, yeah, so the transom's like just not having the grill patterns within them. But I think it's fine if they're three separate windows. I don't know if the commissioners have an opinion on that, but.
Any comment, commissioners? Questions?
So the staff had brought up a concern about using the shingle from above the floor line and bringing it below. And I see what the staff is saying on that, how it is an inversion of the front of the house. Is that something the applicant is willing to move to a board?
We can further
Similar-
discuss it. Per our last conversations, they would very much like cedar shake. Originally, they had wanted to try to use a natural cedar shake product, but we understand that we need to paint to match the existing home. So they do have a preference for the shake, but I mean, we can reevaluate that if necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll open the floor for public comment. Can you come up, please, and speak into the microphone? Thank you.
With the,
Can you, yeah, right into the microphone.
okay. The foundation.
Yeah,
sorry.
You
Okay,
start over.
start it. I swear to tell the truth. My name is Leslie Humphrey. I'm also an applicant later in the agenda. It looks like the original foundation is brick, and so I don't know why you're not asking about stucco versus brick for the new addition for consistency. And what was the other word that we say? Compatibility? That was, I'm just asking.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comment? Close the floor for public comment.
Madam Chair, I find personally that the cedar shake, if painted to match the house, is compatible because it exists on the historic dwelling. If an alternate siding material were proposed, then I could see saying that such a siding might not be compatible. I don't think it has to mimic the siding on the main body of the dwelling to be considered compatible. I think that the use of this shingles helps differentiate the new from the old, and the stuccoing of the foundation differentiates the new from the old. But I also respect the fact that, my fellow commissioners may have a different opinion.
On the stucco part, it looks like there's I don't know if this is part of the addition but on the west elevation, there's like a part of the home that is butted out that looks to be stucco on the renderings. So
That is an addition.
okay, so that's part of the addition.
I find that the jog in the roof and the elevation particularly, you can see it in the north elevation. It just, sorry.
Yeah.
So the jog in the roof, and I understand why the architect made that decision to get underneath the original dormer, but I think that really just, it doesn't feel very compatible with the historic nature and the design standards that we're supposed to be going with and evaluating against. It looks so odd to me. And in fact, the dormers on the lowest part there also they stand out to me as well, because those dormers are typically on the second story, and we're putting them now they're being located at the lowest part of this. And again, I understand why the design drove that. I don't know, I'm struggling with that, I guess.
So that was to avoid the other dormer from the original house, the sway back saddle, whatever we call it.
It does look awkward. I don't know if there's a way to bring, almost even like keep the roof lines the way they are, but bring up, I don't even know how to explain what I'm trying to say, but like bringing in so that the lower part isn't obviously sticking out as far as the upper part on those. Yeah. I don't even know if that's like able to be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I should have included a building section in this so you can kind of see the head heights that we're
Yeah.
working with this, but essentially we're set at just at 6'8" in the bathrooms in here, so it's an attempt to achieve building code. If we raise the roof, we're impacting that rear dormer, and if we lower it, we're not meeting head height requirements for the interior space.
Thank you.
A question I have for my colleagues on the board is that stepped roof line incompatible or incongruous with the historic building? Because when I was reviewing the plans, I had the same gut reaction, but in looking at the design standards, I struggle with, are we pointing out something that we don't feel comfortable with because it seems awkward, and it seems awkward because it's meeting specific site conditions? Or are we raising this issue because we find it to be incongruous with the historic character of the building? Because I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence about that. I'm leaning toward, like, I can see compatibility in certain features of the addition, it is certainly diminutive in scale, subordinate to the main building, and that short section functions kind of like a hyphen, which is often a way to, link a larger space to an existing building. So I guess that's just food for thought. Is it incongruous with the character of the historic building? And if so, why? I agree it's funky.
I think that the massing of it is very different than the rest of the building. Because the rest of the building is one, extruded gabled form that then has these pop-ups where this one is stepped, and is different.
Thank you for that clarification,
Yeah.
Sandra.
I tend to agree with what you're saying. Obviously, I will say that this house obviously has very limited options for placing addition. We had a house that was very different architecturally, but similar challenges on Starnes Avenue years ago, where the rear-facing portion of the roof had like an M shape, had like a double gable that came off the back of it, and it made having an addition to it really difficult from a design perspective. There was just no way to make it not look kind of odd. So just to play the other side of the fence.
Maybe something that could help it is the materials. So, because it's almost like there's 3 different volumes, right? Or 3 different masses. There's the original house, there's the bathroom, the lower roof addition, and then there's the higher roof addition. Maybe there's 2 different siding types between the two. Because I'm not bothered by the shake siding, even on the lower story, especially like my fellow commissioner said about it all being painted the same. It already exists there. And then the other thing that I find I'm struggling with a little bit is the proportions of the window on the west elevation. I'm sorry. The proportions of the window on the west elevation does not seem to be compatible with the rest of the house, with that transom up above. That seems really foreign. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way.
I agree, it doesn't match the other windows on the house. And I'm looking through the standards on additions, and there's so much of what this accomplishes, and by being but in the siding and the size and its diminutiveness to the main house, I think what I'm hearing from some commissioners as well as myself is that that double-heighted, the addition with the 2 heights of roof line is, should that just be as simple as the main house with a flat roof that comes off in an L instead of that extra jump at the lower level?
In other words, straight across. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Or, yes.
Do you want to address that?
Or maybe go ahead.
I mean, as I've stated, I guess my main concern is just the dormer at the rear and its obstruction of that dormer.
But if it were brought down to the middle height and continued across westward.
So you're saying if everything was the same height as this, the connecting roof to the existing house?
Yeah.
But that's what she was saying, it's only 6 foot 8 inches.
Oh, that was at a height?
Yeah, it's a height, it's a building code height issue, just because that is a bathroom in there, and you're required to have 6'8" over the fixtures. So we're
I hear you.
right there. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further comments or questions, commissioners?
Is there, I haven't had a chance to look, is there anything in the design standards on like the foundation changing? Or I guess that's just a historical element?
I think generally it's all, most people have proposed matching,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not, like to Commissioner McDonald's point, there's not, doesn't say that, it doesn't say it has to match, but I would say that the commission has generally required, or pretty much always required traditional materials. I don't think that, I don't have an issue with the stucco material myself. If there is a goal obviously to make it discernible
Mm-hmm.
from the historic part of the house. My two main things were the roof line and as far as like where the lower section of the roof is, which I understand why they did that, of course, and then also the fenestration on the west elevation were my biggest things that challenge meeting the standards to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Comments or questions? Where are we?
Well, from my count, there's a question about the west window transom. There's a question about the roof line, and there's a question about the material of the addition. Is there something else?
I think
I know there's a fair amount of folks we haven't heard from. Thoughts?
I have a question for the architect again. If you, I understand that you have like head height, like issues, okay. But if you were to take like the roof line that's on the connector, take it all the way through like to the primary, bedroom, and use the same kind of extruded like dormers to kind of create like a head height.
In the bedroom?
Could you do that on either side? And so you've got like one roof line kind of containing the whole. I mean, I know there's some finagling.
I guess my only concern with that would be instead of having two roof elevations and a dormer, then we would have two different dormers, which I'm not sure addresses the problems, but I mean, we could certainly look at it if necessary.
One other possible way to address that stepped down roof line, and I'm not an architect, is to turn that gable 90 degrees on the back section of the building. It would result in other changes to the design, but it would seem to resolve the issue that I'm hearing from fellow commissioners about concerns in congruity of concerns about the congruity of that roof line with the main building. But then you would lose that kind of quite nice transom arrangement on that rear wall, which now we know, is for a bedroom. And so that's clearly an interior focal feature. But one way to resolve the exterior envelope issue is to pivot that gable 90 degrees. And that's like the one thing I will do to, in designing from the bench, because I'm generally not in favor of that. But that's something to consider.
Would that put any of the trees, though, that are there at risk? No?
I mean, it shouldn't change the footprint that you're
It
suggesting.
wouldn't change the footprint. It would just change the way the walls appear. But you could have the way that the way that hyphen angles into the main roof line would be similar to how it would angle into the roof line of the rear section of the building.
I think the only issue I have with that is just that that would be putting the main window wall directly facing the neighbor's house,
Yeah.
essentially, rather than the backyard and the privacy of the backyard. Also, from my understanding, and you might be able to speak better to this, David, the properties looking at the rear of the home are not actually in the historic district. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So the view lines from the rear of this house are not from the historic district.
Yeah, you can't.
If I could just add to that, given the mature vegetation screening on the front, including a large conifer, you can't really see any of this from the historic district. And the way that the back of the lot points, it's pointing out of the historic district. So you can only see glimpses of the rear of the house in the winter, but not from in the historic district because the street behind is outside of the historic district. So I just throw that out as a consideration. I realize, and I know we've grappled with this for many months to try and come up with a design that meets our needs, but also respects the structure and as is compatible with the existing house. So we have spent a lot of time on this. To have this feature of our master bedroom looking directly at the house beside us and their back deck would fundamentally change the experience of that room.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioners, so where are we? Are we ready to move forward? Or we have,
I think the roof line is funky, but I'm prepared to approve it, given all of the various conditions of the property. I'm prepared to make a motion to approve it.
I had one question. Are you painting this stucco, or is it staying very much that gray?
We'll paint the stucco.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
And the railing detail, the pedestrian door, the landscape plan, dimensions for skylights, and lighting is all desk
We've
approved?
got everything except for, I've added the conditions to the motion already. We just need the pedestrian crawl space door specifications and the dimensions for skylights. And
The
if you-
skylight's 24 by 48.
Did you send that to me today?
I did,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. So don't need that. But if you do want to do mechanical unit, you can apply for that later.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, it's,
Yeah, that would be
I'm
my
leaving
work.
it to the HVAC experts to specify
Yeah,
that.
most people, when they're at this stage, aren't really
Okay.
good, ready to make that call. So
Okay,
that
great.
would be down the road and administrative.
Thank you.
Sorry, tell me the dimension one more time.
24 by 48.
Okay, thank you.
Inches?
Yes.
it's going to be very large.
And on the rear windows, wasn't there an offer to make those single light? I don't know if you want them to modify the application, or there were a couple of people that commented on wasn't the rear windows with the transoms?
Right.
So that would be if you want a modification, you would request if they want to modify it. I don't know how strongly everybody feels.
Does anyone want a modification on the,
Well, I just want to say that even though it faces the edge of the district boundary, they still need to be proportionate to the existing structure per the standards. Just my 2 cents on that.
Are those the rehabbed windows on the bottom from?
No, those would be put on the the south elevation,
Right,
correct?
okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying if they're single, they need to be a smaller size?
So I think we're saying as a commission that those transom windows are both the size and that they're full plate glass, three panels, but at the same size.
no, Alex is saying no.
I wasn't saying anything about the size. I was just saying the grills in the
take the grills out.
Right, it's just one light.
And I think the applicant was fine with that because they just
Yeah,
added
we're
it
absolutely
because
fine with that,
Okay.
yes.
Now I got grill crazy.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, no grill crazy. Okay.
I think we would
The
prefer that as
Elvis
well.
movie. Later in life.
So that's a
So is that the
modification.
last?
Well, it's just, yeah,
It's- Unless it was specified.
just need to say that they're okay to amend their application. And then we'll just need a revised elevation drawing.
Not a problem.
Okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, based on the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, the application of 2 pages, Exhibit B, the project description, Exhibit C, the owner's affidavit, Exhibit D, the existing and proposed site plans of 2 pages, Exhibit E, the existing and proposed elevation plans of 2 pages, Exhibit F, the existing and proposed floor plans of 2 pages, Exhibit G, the tree protection plan, Exhibit H, the skylight window and siding specifications of 26 pages, Exhibit I, the material specifications, Exhibit J, the renderings of 3 pages, Exhibit K, photographs of 4 pages, Exhibit L, the landscape plan received May 8th, 2024, Exhibit M, the railing detail received May 8th, 2024, and the commission's actual inspection and review of the subject property. I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness based on the following. That the application is for construction of a 1-story, 310 square foot addition with painted stucco foundation, cedar shake shingles that will be painted to match the existing dwelling, and a certainteed asphalt shingle roof in colonial slate color matching the existing on the rear elevation. 3 existing wood 4/1 double hung windows will be removed from the rear elevation and reused on the south elevation of the addition. Remove existing stone patio and deck and construct a new 16-foot 7-inch by 10-foot 11-inch wood deck on the rear elevation. Modify existing paired window openings. Existing pair of original windows will be moved slightly to the right, and a new door opening with new single light wood door will be installed immediately adjacent to connect to the new deck. Installation of 3 new 24-inch by 48-inch dark gray Velux fixed skylights will be installed on rear-facing portion of roof on existing structure. The ground cover must be established within 15 days of completion of construction, and the remainder of the landscaping must be installed within 3 years. If archaeological resources are discovered during site work, work will cease until city staff have been notified and have inspected the site. All work will be in accordance with attached and approved drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence. And one short addenda. Oh, I missed the one on Geldwen windows. New windows on addition will be Geldwen sightline wood 4 light simulated divided light casement and wood 4/1 simulated divided light double hung with single light transoms. 1 pair of crawl space access doors will be installed on the rear elevation of the addition. Did I catch it all? I think I did. The standards for additions found on pages 88 to 89, windows and doors on pages 84 to 85, decks on pages 38 to 39, landscaping and trees on pages 40 to 41, utilities and mechanical systems on pages 82 to 83, and archaeology on pages 32 to 33 of the Montfort Historic District Design Review Standards adopted April 14, 2010 and amended December 14, 2016 were used to evaluate this request. This application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. The new addition is sited on the rear elevation where historic character defining features will not be damaged, destroyed, or obscured. The addition is inset from the rear building corners to differentiate it from the existing building and to reduce public visibility. The addition is designed to be compatible with the existing building in height, massing, roof form, and pitch. The scale and size of the addition are limited so as to limit its visual impact and to not overpower the site or substantially alter the site's proportion of built area to green space. The windows on the addition are similar to those on the existing building in their proportions, spacing, and materials. Exterior siding and details are compatible with the existing building materials and material, texture, color, and character. The existing windows will be removed from the rear elevation of the existing structure and are being reused. Window openings being modified, or the window opening being modified on the rear elevation, and the new door will be wood. The new deck will be located on the rear elevation, inset from the rear building corners by at least 12 inches, and compatible in scale, proportion, materials, and detail with the historic building. Structural framing of the deck will be screened with square wood lattice. New skylights will be installed on a rear-facing portion of the roof. That the action and improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the Montfort Historic District.
Second, Hornaday.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Based upon the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued with the following conditions. The pedestrian and crawl space door specifications will be submitted for staff review and approval. A revised west elevation will be submitted for staff review and approval.
Second, Hornaday.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. You all ready for the next one? Everybody good? Okay. All right, so this one is also just a single slide here. This house we looked at a couple months ago for porch enclosure, as some of you probably will remember. When reviewing that application, I realized that there were some windows in the second story of the rear elevation that had been replaced. Only knew that because they had Pella stickers on them in this photograph. So this application is retroactive approval request for the window replacement for all the windows that are on that little sleeping porch portion of the second story. Unfortunately, the new woods are aluminum clad, and the standards require newer units to be wood. So I don't have a way to recommend approval of the application. So that's really what this one is.
What was the material of the windows they replaced?
That I do not know, and noted in my staff report that we don't know anything about what was there before. This building has been altered quite a bit. It looks like the windows in the front were replaced at some point too, and I don't know that that really means a whole lot based on what the standards say. Like, the whole idea obviously is if, insensitive materials have been used for rehab over time, that, the goal is to restore a historic structure, and the standards say wood, so, for windows. So, but I will defer to the applicant, and they can hopefully give some more information on what the previous windows were and what their conditions were, et cetera. So. Anybody else?
Questions for Alex?
Okay, thank you. Lizzie, you ready to come up? I've got what you submitted here, and then obviously I have my one slide, but you can navigate between the two.
I gave you another picture though, front.
You did?
Yeah.
It's in, well, everything you submitted to us is in this packet. I didn't include everything in my slide deck because I don't have time to include everything that everybody submitted, so you're welcome to just, this is everything you submitted, so you can pull up whatever you like there.
Do you want him to swear he wasn't here before?
Yes.
Just cuss a little bit. You're right.
Wait,
Do you-
I'm a carpenter, be careful.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that all the information you present during this hearing for a certificate of appropriateness or preliminary subdivision approval before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
If you click on that middle one, I'll show you the pictures you're talking about.
Hopefully
The
there's,
middle exhibit B. Scroll down.
Yeah, there.
all right. 4.
Take a minute to load it for me.
So we've been in the house for 25 years, 6 years now. And when we first got the house, both the front and back porch windows were gone. And in 2001, we submitted to enclose this front porch, sleeping porch, for
It looks the same as the back of the house almost, but this picture is the front of the house, and these upper porch windows are wood, and we replaced those in 2001 with approval from the HRC. So I submitted this for comparison to the back.
So similarly, in the back, they were non-existent since we've been there, and most likely they were wood. And so anyway, assuming that because it was in the back of the house, didn't need to apply, and therefore got the windows. And I'll be honest with you, we'll be back in a couple of years to get approval to replace these front windows, as they are fully wood in the front of the house. And they are suffering from, the weather. And so that's how I chose to use the aluminum cladding on the back, so that they would last.
So this is the back that we're talking about today. And, sorry, that's the front that we're referencing.
The back is very similar to the front.
Astute observation.
You said it, I'm just repeating it.
I guess in Leslie's description as well, when we bought the house, the 3 double hung windows on the left in the lower part of the house, that was a big plate glass window, and at that time we chose to get 1/1 double hung windows and to replace that plate glass piece. That actually had been a porch all the way across the front, but before us, somebody had enclosed the porch and, just put the big plate glass piece in. But
What was the material of the windows that you took out on the back porch? What was there that you replaced?
as you recall, when I said earlier, we got the house in these porch gable end areas, there were no windows. They had rotted out and had to be replaced.
Okay, so it was just open.
See, the columns
Okay.
and the gable end.
Oops.
They all are cedar shingles. What else is in compliance? Leslie,
Stay on the part that it.
Yeah, we're focusing on the aluminum
All the
part.
good things.
sorry, I'm trying
right.
to distract you.
Yeah.
I guess, what was the decision when replacing the back windows, how the front ones, it seems like they slide side to side, and the back ones are all on the same plane?
The back ones are casement, and the front, when we bought in 2001, we got sliders, and they are impossible to operate. They're just really bad.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you have to use your whole body to drag. I think maybe it was the installation.
And that central window is a fixed 16 light flanked by
Yes.
double leaf
Yes, and in
casements?
the
Okay.
application, or on the sign in our front yard, it says replace 10 windows, but it's actually 9. Right? 2, 4.
The one on the third floor is
Second floor.
original?
Yeah, that's in the attic. Up in the gable end.
Yeah, that was the 10th window, was just the little casement in the gable end.
Yeah, that was
Assumed
original.
that was,
No, that's original. And then in the front of the house, sorry, we just have this screen here in the summer. But we put the original one back in the winter. It's there now, if you drive by.
Comments, commissioners?
I have a question. I don't know if I'm going to get myself in trouble or if this is appropriate, but we're here for an after-the-fact approval. And if we're not approved, is there like are there choices? We pay a fine, or we have to throw these $8,000 worth of windows away and replace them with wood? What are the outcomes of this hearing?
The outcome, depending on what the commission says, if
Right.
we don't approve it, then you would have to, you would have to replace the windows. It's not there's no automatic fine, and then you get to keep the
Okay, because we
windows.
have a neighbor, and it doesn't bother me, but they applied for an after-the-fact approval of a brick surround for their swimming pool.
Yeah.
And I think they were denied, and I don't know what the result of that was for them.
I think
But it was
that's.
more than $8,000 investment, I know.
That is still in process.
I'm sorry?
That has not been. If you go
Well,
ahead.
that option, they filed an appeal. And then if you
Right.
file an appeal with the courts, then the statutes do allow there to be a request for the city council to settle something. Now, what means settle, I don't know. But, and that is something that the council on that one has decided to consider. But you would still have to go, what happens here is if it's denied, you could appeal. The appeal goes straight to Superior Court. And in an appeal, you're trying to say that the standards were not correct for some reason.
I see.
So.
I remember reading in the standards after the fact. I mean, I knew, we've been married 35 years, and there are things that we agree on and things we disagree on, and sometimes we just give and take, so. And David corrected me, it was more than $8,000. But hopefully you read my paragraph, my description of the project, and it's up to you guys.
I appreciate that there was a significant financial investment. Our hands are kind of tied because the guidelines require that the windows be wood.
Right.
So,
They're wood on the inside. They're wood windows. Clad.
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna zip it now.
Yeah, it's not an arbitrary decision for
I
us.
understand, I know that.
And as in the case of 19 Rosewood, there was consideration for the rear of the house and it not being an issue. Some of the conditions, the back of the
That was from the applicant, but I think staff was pretty clear about the houses in the district. And that, it's how I recall.
I think they were talking about like the design of the windows, style of the transom. That's what I thought.
Right, it wasn't the material of the windows. This does come up. There's a lot of people that wood windows actually last longer than aluminum windows, and they're historic.
provided they're maintained.
Well, that's true, and I understand, I hear your concern, I understand, but it's very clear that windows need to be wood.
Some standards are more clear than others. Some
Yes,
might
that's true.
provide a little leeway, especially with additions, if there's, compatible, that conversation about what is compatible, does it have to be exactly the same material or not? But even then, it had to be wood. And then you had asked the question about stucco foundation, but there is tradition stucco, it's going to be painted. So window standards are usually pretty clear.
Well, I agree, it's clear. I think David mostly thought because it's on the rear of the house, it didn't apply to him. I mean, to this project.
Yeah, I understand how you came to that conclusion. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit within the
Not in the
guidelines.
standards. Yeah.
I have a question for them. Are you guys aware that there's like a little movement in Montford to update the design standards?
I'm highly aware of it, and I disagree with their proposal. I think that if people are gonna apply individually, that's their job. I don't want to see Mumford covered in aluminum windows. I think people should keep, we have 1/1s, all the rest of the windows in the house are 1/1s, original. They leak, they rattle, the wind blows through the glass, and I like that. I'm not inclined, personally, I'm not inclined to replace those windows with something efficient, because I like my historic house. And, yeah, I'm on the other side of that argument. There were three or four of us.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that, because I guess they're talking about efficiency and sustainability and citing that in some of their concerns.
They should move to the country and build a new house.
And I'm the one who said that you're stewards of these homes. You don't necessarily, I mean, the home will outlast you. It was there before you were born.
Right.
In that particular meeting, but yeah, just curious about that.
Yeah.
And your thoughts.
Here's a fun, for my fellow commissioners, here's a fun, interesting comparison of a couple of design standards on page 85. Standard number 4, you said they were missing, right? There were no windows on that porch when you bought the house. If a window or door is completely missing, replace it with a new unit based on available documentation of the original or a new design compatible with the original opening and the historic character of the building. And then going down to design standard number 7. New or replacement windows and doors on existing historic homes should be wood. Now, I could get into my whole philosophical thing about why I hate the word should in design standards. But if the HRC has previously required wood, the design standards say they should be wood. Doesn't say they have to be, which tells me or suggests to me that there may be some conditions under which the HRC might find that a different material is not incongruous with the character of the property. As the applicant has testified, the windows are wood, they're just clad. So arguably, one could say that they meet that standard number 7 because they are wood, but they are clad. And it says they should be wood. It doesn't, I respect the HRC's longstanding history of requiring wood. However, that's not what the design standards say in writing.
I would just say that the intent is clear. The intent is to preserve historic windows. And if you are, let's say somebody, and also to go back to, you can only replace window that's damaged or deteriorated beyond repair, original or historic window.
But the windows were missing. There were no
Do you know
windows.
the age and the character of the house? And would there have been aluminum-clad windows, an original window ever?
That's hard to say, given when the windows may have been installed. It may have been constructed without windows. If we don't have historic documentation, we don't know.
The opening was there, I think they said.
The opening was there, and openings get filled. I lived in a house that had a porch that had aluminum casement windows. So that's,
I mean, you can open it up, but should is clear. I mean, historic guidelines, often people don't like to use the word shall because it sounds like such a command, but should is much, I think, I would argue that the word would be may if it was going to be, you have some choice here, leeway. I think should was just instead of a shall, which a lot of, for the public, it seems too commanding.
But under this application, does that language give the HRC leeway to establish conditions under which it might find the installed windows to be congruous?
What would be your reasons in this case?
It is not visible from the public way and therefore has zero impact on the historic character of the district as perceived by the general public.
I don't think that's an appropriate interpretation. We have the St. Dunstan's historic district standards are written to say that, but none of our other historic district standards are written to say that. And I don't think, to Janice's point, like if we're kind of comparing the Biltmore Village standards, they say should, shall, whatever, and then they do
And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we're fine with whatever. I'm saying that we may be able to establish in the findings of fact conditions that are specific to this site that still comply with the letter of the standards and, by some people's perhaps interpretation, the intent.
Then it's like a slippery slope. So we're starting with this home. This one home can have aluminum clad windows on their real elevation because now it's just a finding of fact that we've just decided that the wording is and the vocabulary is, we're interpreting it different than how it was put in there. But, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's just a slippery slope. Then someone comes in and says, well, my front whole elevation didn't have any windows because it's an old rotted out home, so they can have all aluminum windows now.
Well, a slippery slope is a logical fallacy. And if you're talking about the front of the house, then we would find that those conditions are different from the conditions here.
I was going to use the same term, slippery slope, and it's illegal, and legally, we're getting into semantics. You can have your opinion that this is the way, the intent and what
Yeah.
it should be, but precedence does matter in the Historic Resources Commission and applying the guidelines, and you are, again, I don't know, I haven't read all the ones, but do they say, you can consider that it's in the rear? There are some standards that say if something is in the rear, we do have some more leeway. I don't think that is the case for windows. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I think other commissioners might.
What I'll say is I would have a completely different opinion if they were replacing windows that had been there, but they are filling an opening.
They did on the front elevation as well, though.
Say it again?
You guys did on this front elevation as well. Like,
With approval.
We did.
With the HRC.
And in fact, when we bought the house in 1998, there were, I think on the side, this is south facing, the front, I think on the two sides of the porch, there was at least one aluminum,
Yeah.
it was like a storm window that they had caulked into place. I mean, it was a really janky house. It was,
Well, the whole thing was clad in aluminum, the entire
The
thing.
whole house.
And under that was asbestos. And so we removed each of these layers to bring back shingles. And so anyway,
but, so the HRC, you know, the committee came over to our house. It wasn't this many people, but there were 5 or 6, and they're like, oh, I see caulk lines. Yes, there were windows here, and yes, you know, we don't want this kind of aluminum window. You know, so there's stages of rehab on an old house. Like at one time it was this, one time it was that. We were lucky with this house. Hardly anything had been changed. It was just beat up and covered up. But on the front porch, frankly, we needed the room. And so since there were those 2 side panels were there, we said, well, let's close up the whole porch. And I don't know why we chose wood back then, because we didn't have to. But we did.
we'll be replacing them soon.
But to staff's point, I've clearly shot my mouth off quite a bit. I would love to hear what other commissioners have to say about this.
I just want to say one more thing to respond to what you said, Annie. It says, number 7 says new or replacement windows. And so, and also the enclosure that you all just got approval for has windows on it, and that was within the findings of that application and the addition that was just reviewed and approved for, with windows, and they were on the back. So I agree with the slippery slope. I'll be quiet.
Fences are a slippery slope too, though, right? Well, should we rest our case? Does anybody have anything else?
I appreciate that you're willing to work with the historic.
Alex turned us in.
Yeah. Well, if you didn't have the stickers, you probably wouldn't have noticed.
Sorry.
She's like a mandatory reporter or something.
Yeah.
Not at all my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more questions for the applicant, unless there are.
Yeah, no, I don't think so
No,
either.
I'll
Thank
sit
you.
down for a little bit, and we'll open it up to some other folks. All right.
I'm going to open it to public comment. Do we have any public comment? close the floor to public comment. Okay, commissioners? I think because the precedent has been wood windows, and Annie, I appreciate what you said. I just disagree.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of having a large board to make these decisions.
And it's also an issue I think you're bringing up with the standards themselves is it would help the community.
Yeah, I agree.
This community member's nodding. If we kind of got the standards to a point that was
Clear.
a little more clear on where it can be clear. And this is a good example, though. I would argue that they really tried to make this one pretty clear, but it's not perfect. No.
I will admit that I had an ulterior motive in going down that path. I mean, both in, with respect to this current application, this current COA application, but with the overall issue of the language and consistency of design standards.
Yeah, it's not lost on me, for sure. I think that's a process that we're working on moving forward. It's going to take time, but I agree. It needs to be clear and so it's fair and equal. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Now, the only thing I could say is, depending on the way this goes, you could give time frame, some kind of relief in terms of time to replace, because it is costly, but I just, to the extent that, I don't, whether that's within the staff to just work with staff on the time frame and something that they could do over a time period if it turns out that these cannot be approved and need to be replaced, to the extent that helps.
How do you feel about that? Is there a time frame that no time frame?
And I guess, this would be up for us to ask the applicant, but if, as an alternative to denying the application, if you all said, okay, we're okay saying in this meeting that we'll replace the existing windows with wood windows that meet the standards, then that's a way to amend their application so that
It's not denied.
But that's a decision that you all would have to.
What are you saying?
Oh, I just was saying that it is an alternative to them denying the application flat out with the clad windows, that you could say, okay, commission, we realize that you're gonna deny the application, or we think you are, and we're amenable to changing our application to replace the windows that were replaced with wood windows that meet the standards. Then they could, if you were willing to amend the application that way, then they could.
And then there's a time period extension sort of.
I think either way, I guess that's really up to you, because if, like Janice was saying, if they deny the application, you do have the right to appeal it to the Superior Court.
I'm not going to go through the appeal because it's obvious according to the standards, we aren't going to have windows, but you're saying.
Can you come up? Sorry.
You're saying apply now, like withdraw our approval for the aluminum clad, and then apply for replacing the brand new aluminum clad ones with wood?
Yeah.
And then not do it for 30 years?
This application, just say you will. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, she was saying the same thing. Just, you could amend the application just in the meeting verbally.
Right now.
You don't have to submit a new application or anything. Just say, okay, commission, we're good with replacing the clad windows with wood windows that meet the standards, and then they could approve it instead of it being denied. And
then staff could look at the materials.
We would apply to replace the new aluminum windows with wood windows.
Correct.
Or bring them to.
Can you come up? Sorry.
She's saying like you can amend your application right now, or you can reapply when it comes to replacing them again, like.
You can
if
have us
it
not
gets to-
vote, so we don't deny it for you today. You
Right.
can either amend it or we can give you more time.
Right, but my question is, if we amend it and ask to replace the new aluminum ones with wood ones, and that
Then
gets
you don't have
approved.
to apply again.
I don't have to apply again,
Yeah.
but do I have to replace the window?
Yes,
Like,
you do.
I figured.
That's a nice try.
We will make
The
them
audience knew
wood.
the answer on that one.
We will make these windows wood.
We will
We are
peel off.
carpenters. We will make
Peel
them
off
wood.
the aluminum. But is there a time frame when you apply? Is it 1 year?
What is a reasonable amount
Yeah,
of
what do
time
you-
think that you could correct it? And I think that will help us understand like your.
What's the lifespan? What's the warranty on those?
How long did it, took us 25 years to get these? So we can afford to put these windows in.
Not quite
This
that
isn't
long.
marriage therapy. We're just trying to work on these windows. House therapy.
Yeah, I know you're going to deny it, so yes, I'd like to amend the application, and then we'll figure it out. But these are custom sizes, so I don't know how to, I mean, thank you.
But just like,
No, we want,
Would you, li-
need a time.
yeah, just give us some kind of idea how long that would take if you guys are going to look at them and figure out how to clad them in wood? Is that
Like 6 months? Or
6 months?
9 months or a year? What are we talking
What do you guys, we're trying to help here. We want to,
You're gonna modify the existing, the windows that are in there
Right.
to be wood clad. So
Right.
You're going to make them wood clad.
That's pretend.
okay, that's not helpful.
Huh?
No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I
So-
don't know, I just have to come up with, I mean, the reason we didn't get wood was the aluminum ones were 14,000? I said 8, but I was wrong. That was the deposit.
These are 14,000 and I think that the full wood is like 26.
Yeah. And that's why that
No,
was
I understand.
how the decision was made.
Yeah, it's
So
an
now
option.
it's up to 40.
No.
Do you need something more from me?
what is the timeline that you're going to change the windows? How long is it going to take you?
25 years.
Do you understand how busy we are as carpenters?
No,
And-
I understand.
No,
I do. I work with carpenters every day, but, I mean, we want to give you time. We don't want to say 6 months if you need a year.
Well, we would definitely need a year because we're renovating our kitchen right now.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
have,
let's just say 12 months then, and then the CA will expire at
Okay.
a year anyway, so.
I can figure it out in a
We
year.
need to figure out something.
Just get a loan. We'll be fine. Just don't know what to do with those nice new windows.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Thanks.
Who's going to take them out?
Yeah, so how do we do?
So you're voting on a modified application that is to, well, they're going to get rid of the aluminum clad.
They're gonna
and
replace them.
Replace the aluminum clad that they've installed with wood clad within a year's time.
And that's not that's just a loosely worded, just what you said? Or is it the actual?
And then you can have the exact one to be approved by staff. I don't think
Okay.
we'll have the same, it's.
The motion.
The motion might
Yeah,
not
we're
have
just-
all the same material. I don't think.
We just, just take a little minor edit.
So just read the motion as is?
Oh, wait, no, hang on. Give me a second.
And it's 9 windows, not. She's good.
All right, you can go ahead.
Chair, based upon the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, application and project description, 3 pages, Exhibit B, renderings and photograph, 4 pages, Exhibit C, window specifications, 2 pages, and the commissioner's actual inspection and review of the subject property, I move that this commission approve this certificate of appropriateness based on the following. 1, the application. is for an after-the-fact approval to replace 9 windows on the rear elevation with new wood multi-light windows. All work will be in accordance with the attached and approved drawings and plans. The standards for windows and doors found on pages 84, 85 of the Montfort Historic District Design Review Standards, adopted April 14th, 2010, and amended December 14th, 2016, were used to evaluate this request. This application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. New or replacement windows will be wood. 4, that the actions and improvements proposed in this application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the Montfort Historic District.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Based upon the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued with the following conditions. Windows specifications will be submitted for staff review and approval, and wood windows will be installed within 12 months of HRC approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie, I'll follow up with you guys in the next couple of days, just circle back.
Help us figure out.
Thank y'all.
All right. Our last public hearing item, 6 Danville Place, new primary structure and accessory structures. So on the top left is the parcel map. This is a lot that was subdivided maybe within the past 3 years, I guess, off of 20 Watauga Street that fronts on, obviously on Watauga. On the right-hand side, existing site plan, it's a vacant parcel with some trees that need to be removed, and then the site plan is on the bottom right, and we'll revisit that in a bit. So I'm just going to go through the plans a bit, and then I'll get in the weeds in my staff report. So the proposal is for a little bit of back and forth with the applicants, but just to clarify, whenever we write a CA request for a new structure, we do include the square footage for the overall structure, whether or not it's going to be fully finished at the time of construction or not. So the second story is, I have it in my notes somewhere, around like 2,500, or the main story is about 2,500 square feet, and then there's a lower story that's on the north side of the house that is partially within grade. That's the rest of the square footage calculation. So this is the front elevation on the top that's facing facing Danville Place. So this is kind of unusual because it's on the corner of 2 alleys, so it's tucked back behind other structures. Bottom image is just a perspective rendering. This is looking at the south elevation, so you can see the new primary structure and the new garage structure next to it. With the perspective rendering, and as you can see in the elevation drawing on the top, there is a breezeway proposed connecting the 2 structures. This is so I created my slides before we got some of the revised plans, but there are some revised plans in your packet. We just asked for in their elevation drawings, they combined the little garage structure and the primary structure. It didn't really make that much of a difference, but we needed them for our files anyway, so we've got all 4 elevations. For the top elevation that's in my slide of the primary structure doesn't include the fenestration that the little garage structure will be sitting in front of if you're looking at it from the west, and so that elevation is in the revised plan set. There's just a pedestrian door and a couple of windows on that side of the primary structure.
And then on the bottom is the north elevation, where the exposed foundation is that I was talking about. So just some kind of contextual images. The design standards are a little tricky for this kind of thing. They state that new structures along alleys should be smaller and similar in design to the structures that are behind. So this is the primary structure that is fronting on Watauga Street. And I included the roof form for this structure because I feel like it's relevant when we're talking about the proposed design of the new structures. By comparison, this is the roof form for the new structures. I think that there could be some tweaks made. First of all, my main concern is the overall scale and size of the primary structure. I don't think I included it in my slides, but it's in the folder and we can pull it up, but I just wanted to kind of go through all of this really quickly before we get to the applicant, and then we can get in the weeds if you all want me to. I just did a little bit of an analysis comparing the other primary structures that are around Watauga, Montford, and Pearson that abut the same alleyways and the size of the accessory structures behind them, just to compare. There is a new structure immediately next door to where this one's being proposed that's behind 30 Watauga, and the just calculation, I think overall square footage was about 50% of the overall square footage of the primary structure, the historic structure that was on Watauga. So this one's about, I think it's like just under 60%. So they also included some of these comparative images just in terms of looking at the different examples. The one in the middle there is the one I was just describing that's right next door, where the 109 Kingsland Alley and those little structures are, I shouldn't say little, they're pretty decent size, but the structures along the alley are under construction. And then these are other examples from Danville Place that also are behind primary structures. And these, I did grab all of the square footage in my little comparative analysis document that I added to the folder. Those are all in there if you want to take a look. This is their density study, so I'll let them speak to this because this was really their image. But what I thought it kind of illustrated to me was really how big the footprint of this building is compared to the other buildings along the alleyway. Just to give some kind of frame of reference, get to my notes for this one. So again, this is the 30 Watauga Street. That the main level of that structure is 1,650 square feet, and then the lower portion is also 1,650 square feet. I can't talk anymore at this point in the day. And similarly, but even more so, that structure is like the back of it is within the grade for the most part too, with some of it exposed, like the structure that's being proposed. But if you look down, if you scroll down, most of the accessory structures are pretty darn small in scale. Even the bigger ones or the ones that appear bigger within the landscape, like the ones behind the I forget all the bed and breakfasts. There are two larger ones that are on the end of Danville Place that are right down here. Got these massive primary structures out in front that are like 5,500 square feet, and even those structures are a fair amount smaller than what I had expected when I looked at granted the property. Yep, thank you, Black Walnut. And granted, these, I will just preface this, or my caveat for the square footages are pulled from the property cards, which we all know are not exact, but should be somewhere in the realm of being close. So they're a lot smaller. So just as a frame of reference.
Are those on the same lot or subdivided?
They're on the same lot. So the standards don't say anything about whether or not the lot's been subdivided, so you can just kind of,
So the historic lot is what we're referencing
there's
more
two,
than the subdivision.
well, the lot's already been subdivided. So you're really just looking at the new structure, right? And its placement and its relationship to that primary structure, because that's what the standards say we're supposed to be looking at. It says that newer structures behind, like new and old on the same site, there's that one, and then there's structures along new structures along alleyways. They say that they should be smaller and similar to design to the houses to the house that's in structure that's in front of them, meaning like the primary structure on the primary right of way. So just my main concern is really the overall square footage as it relates. It's pretty darn big. And I've met with the applicant a handful of times, and we've talked through all this. So this is not like anything new that they're going to hear from my perspective. But just to look at 20 Watauga Street is 3,500 square feet, and this one, overall will be 3,600 square feet. Granted, I don't know if that calculation of 3,500 square feet includes an unfinished garage, because the 20 Watauga does have a little it's exposed on the one side with the garage and maybe on the back too. But just to give kind of at least a general sense of what we're comparing here from a size perspective, because that really was one of my main concerns. And then I did also note, I felt like there could be more similarity between the proposed structures, and that was why I included in particular the roof form. I don't, and I'll let them, the architects team is here, they can speak to you on the design and what their thinking was on how it relates to the primary structure or the structure on Watauga Street. I felt like if we're talking about that, there's a little bit, to me, of a challenge with the, I felt like the regularity of the porch placement around all three sides, and then the breezeway, it feels very, I don't know where I can think of that has porches like that are just plugged in in the middle of every elevation in Montford, I guess. But that's just another thing. I'll let them kind of talk you through the design inspiration for those features. The breezeway, I also have concern about that. I don't know. I can't think of any examples of houses in Montford that have breezeways, with the exception of a porte cochere or something like that. So that's one thing I noted in my report. I just noted, I think the other thing, just to go back to the porches for a second, is just they're kind of partially inset, partially extending from the side elevations, and that feels a little bit like there could be some variation or more similarity to other porches in Montford. As far as shape and massing. I realize this is a very small site they're working on, but that was definitely something that I wanted to also ask the commission to chime in on if you had thoughts. The site feels very built out. It will be mostly impervious surface with the building footprints and driveway and walkways and all of that, because if you can't see on my little tiny site plan, but let me pull up just the individual site plan by itself. There's walkways that go around the other side, and I think that the landscaping is nice. It just feels very intensely built out as compared to, I think we've got a revised site plan, as compared to other sites within the district. And then also the other thing to note is there's an existing fence there, so
And that at the time it was approved, was a rear yard, and there wasn't an improved alleyway there. So just as an FYI, it is now a front yard. Now 2 front yards, I guess, because it's on a corner.
What's the fence?
There's a existing post and wire fence there, and they're proposing to go back with post and wire.
Around the perimeter?
Yeah. And then I just noted, like, there's one material in the site plan materials, is snapped stone. That's just not something that I've seen that come before the commission before, so just something to consider. I'm not saying I have an objection to it, but just an FYI. And then there's a bunch of stuff in my list that I won't go through the whole thing as far as additional information, but they did submit some revisions to us today that are in the packet, which included the elevations I was talking about, some photos and section drawing, and revised renderings, materials, and the site plan. So,
Question?
You're busy.
Yeah.
I was busy and I left something out. Did I say anything about the fenestration, or was I busy talking about porches? And
Yeah, you didn't mention.
I think
that.
I would. I just want to hear from the applicant, I guess, talk more about how the design of the structure relates to the structure in front of it, and how they feel like it's meeting that standard, I guess.
So I just want to clarify for my own ignorance on this. When a property is subdivided, it's not on its own standing. It still relates to the building that it was subdivided. So this one on Chestnut we looked at has to somehow relate to the building that was, not Chestnut, Cumberland. It has to relate, the new one that would come through would have to relate to Mr. Deadman's house?
We've really just applied this for alleyways, but that's a great question. We haven't had that come up because I don't think we've had a subdivision like.
Side by side.
I don't know that we've had a subdivision like that one where it was right immediately next to. I have to go back and think on that, but. But we're applying the standards that speaks to the structures that are along alleyways. That's, and that's where it says it should be smaller and similar, because that's just the character of Montford. It doesn't say it has to match, but it is naturally most of the structures along alleyways were constructed to be kind of in some relationship to a primary structure on a main street. So that's, I think, why the standards were written that way. If I had to.
Isn't there a street pattern standard as well? So it could be an alley pattern standard. I mean, of course, you see some of the historic ones, they have these little tiny buildings on the alley, but, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but.
Yeah, I think it reiterates that. I don't have the standard right in front of me. I can look at it when I sit down, but I think it says in that same blurb about being smaller and similar as far as what it's describing the character of alley structures to be. It basically says that they have to be, contextual to the immediate structures, et cetera.
So just to clarify, what the intention of the standards is that new construction on alleyways match the character of the primary structure on the same site, but they have to be smaller.
Yeah, the standards.
But it should match the scale of the rest of the houses along the alleyway, but that specific structure has to match the character of, the architectural character and roof forms is what it says here, of the primary structure that lot was subdivided from.
Well, it just says it has to be similar in design. It doesn't say it has to match, so I think that's important to distinguish. And then it says that it's smaller. It just says smaller, but it also then says, to your point, it says it needs to be contextual. So we're basically looking around at the other alley structures to understand what that means from an overall size.
Okay, so in terms of character or similarity, it should be similar looking to the main structure, but in terms of scale, it should be similar to the other structures on the alleyway, because those are two different.
Sure, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think it's saying both. It's saying smaller. Does anybody have the standard pull up?
Page 93, number 5, with the size of the alleys.
Can I borrow yours? New primary structures located along alleys behind existing structures or in other locations where the original historic structures were smaller in scale as documented on Sanborn maps or historical photographs should be smaller in scale in keeping with the historic context unless reconstructing a historic structure based on accurate documentation. And then number 8, new and old on the same site. The only historic examples of this in the neighborhood are outbuildings such as garages, carriage houses, and servants' quarters built to the rear of main buildings. It is appropriate for the newer outbuildings to be located behind and be smaller and similar in design. So those are the two standards that we've.
And you said that was on page 93?
Yeah, 93.
And where were you reading from?
It's number 5 and number 8.
Number 5.
5 and 8.
5 and 8.
Printed copies of the standards with me. I haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, I'm hung up on the same site since they're different lots.
But they were part of the same site.
Yeah, I get that.
Alex, I have a question. You had mentioned the roof, and you paid particular attention to the roof of the original main building. Could you go back to that?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to look at this, or do you want to look at the? I had two
The
slides.
aerial, that, okay.
It's not. It's similar in the squareness of it, but there's something about like I think it's maybe the. The gable end on this, I just feel like there's maybe some simple tweaks that could be made to make them feel more related to each other, because right now I don't feel like they're very related to each other. And
So you don't think that it is compatible, the new construction, the roof form is compatible with the existing building?
I think it could be more similar, just from an overall design perspective.
Do you know of any similar roof lines in Montford like that? The tall tinted gable kind of.
This one to me, it has it's almost like a pyramidal roof versus this one has you can't tell from the photo, but it does have a longer the hip roof dominates it a little bit. If you the ridge is right kind of close to a little pinpoint. And it's subtle from the street, but you do notice it. You just don't notice it very much in this photo because there's trees in the way. But I do feel like that tweaking the roof form might help it feel, that might be, I don't mean, it's up to everyone's own perspective, but that's to me one way that.
Given the distance between the two buildings, the existing dwelling and the proposed new construction, will they be visible at once? Are there views from which they can be seen together?
Yes. If you are traveling up Danville Place, there's a tree in the way. And these renderings are interesting. They're hard to read.
That was a weird day. I remember that day when the sky looked like that.
Where there was frost on the
It was
tree.
crazy. I'm glad y'all had the camera out.
But yeah, when you're traveling up, I feel like this picture, you're right next to that structure almost, like this one in the middle right. So if you're traveling up Danville Place, you will experience those two structures together. I mean, they are, to be fair, if you look at the site plan or the that density
They're quite
study,
distant.
they're not
distant. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure what that distance measurement is, but 150 feet.
Any other questions for Alex?
Have we dealt with this before, Alex? I mean, because we're getting to be these, I mean, this is becoming more common with the smaller lots and things being subdivided and whatnot, and, I mean, do you know the last time we've had a size issue like this?
The one at Kingsland Alley, I can't remember if that one got smaller or not. It did, the design of that one, the one that's immediately next to this one, it did change in the design review process to have more similarity from a design perspective to the structure on Watauga, but I don't recall that I don't think it reduced the overall square footage. That one was, I think the primary structure was, again, above grade, was like a little over 1,600 square feet, and then that was the basement floor was finished too, and it was exposed on the rear, like on the portion that was inward facing to 30 Watauga. And similarly to this one will just be more exposed because it's on a corner, and the exposed portion, like that basement level, will be fully exposed for that whole side. So in that way, it feels a little bit bigger because it's the grade change is also different there too. But yeah, so we did talk through that, I think, in terms of like, I mean, I know we did the smaller and similar in scale. I just don't think it netted a much smaller structure.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at, I think this is one of the precedent images, front and back houses. So there's one panel that shows the 20 Watauga Street, which is the primary structure on the lot, and 6 Danville Place, which is the subject of this application. So it's probably the next page. Precedent images too, yeah, all the way the panel to the right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're comparing. The drawing below is this application, and the photo above is the primary structure on the site. And what we're discussing is that drawing, the house in the drawing should be more similar, yet smaller in scale to 20 Watauga Street. Okay. Are there some concrete suggestions that we can give the applicant in terms of what the size should be and what the features should be to make it more similar so that they have some concrete
It's their case
direction?
to make to you. Like, I had several meetings with them to talk to them about the overall scale and my concerns about the overall size of the structure, but, and there was movement from the design perspective, but I can't, micro design somebody's project for them, fortunately for everyone. I'm not an architect. I don't need to go designing anybody's house. But I guess it's just open for interpretation, really, and so at the end of the day, that's why I'm saying I'm deferring to the applicant to explain to you all why they think the design is smaller and similar in scale and meets the standards, because I don't see that. I mean, do you all see that there are design similarities between the structures? Or do you think it just doesn't, it's just like, I don't know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well.
I mean, the only roof line that even seems close in similarity seems to be like 30 Watauga Street. But even then, like, almost like the whole front elevation of the home doesn't necessarily match the other homes around it.
Yeah, and I can't really give like a concrete number because it's really just about context, right? And if you look at, that's why I did that comparison study for the existing accessory structures, because I wanted to understand in my own mind, what are the sizes of these alley structures that are in this, same proximity to this lot? And they're a lot smaller with the exception of that newer one.
Is that breezeway considered a connected garage?
That we would have to ask our zoning staff.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I sent this plan set to them, and I think they said that it would still calculate it as an an accessory structure, even though it had a breezeway, but I don't think it's been interpreted that way every time.
Gotcha.
I've asked that question from our zoning staff, so, but I would ask for some precedent to be shown for that in Montford personally, but the commission may not be that concerned with that element.
comment for Alex. Questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, so do you, this is all your documents are in here? They just,
Drive. Yeah. Well, while they're just introducing the project, I'm going to hand out a couple. This is a print of.
okay, I just wanted to ask you real quick, like, do you want me to just leave, this is the folder with all your documents
Yeah,
on it?
that's fine.
We just relabel everything per our exhibit stuff, so if you need me to find something, hopefully it's clear.
Oh, I think I can find it.
Okay, just let me know if you need my help.
Hey, while he's handing those out, I just thought I'd take a minute or two to introduce ourselves. My name's Mark Wright.
Thank you.
I'm Beth Wright. My wife Beth. We're here today with Ledgerton, Aaron, and Michael. We're from Austin, Texas, looking to retire here in Munford. And I really fell in love with that neighborhood and hired Ledgerton to help us build an what's the word I keep hearing from Annie? An appropriate home. Something like that. I'll let him cover windows and fences too, because that seems to be a hot topic today that I'm not going to cover. Yeah,
Okay, one
exactly.
down,
So
one down.
Anyway, I'm going to be short and let him jump in. We purchased that lot in 2020 to build a primary structure. I think Alex, we're going over the square footage. The main floor is 2350, and we're not going to, at least certainly not at this time, do the basement. We originally had proposed a two-story home. That was encouraged that it was too tall, so we went to one. So I think that the main floor was smaller when it was a two-story home, but when it went to one, we had added one bedroom, so we wouldn't have a one-bedroom home. Right. I also, just a side note, I keep hearing, the alleyway. The name of the street is Danville Place, and it may very well be an alleyway. It's certainly unfortunate that when we bought it, we didn't know we would be considered an alleyway. I don't expect a response from you on that. It's unfortunate. We didn't know. The name was Danville Place, and that's kind of all we know.
Kingsland wasn't there at the time, and we had all sorts of people before we purchased the property to see whether someone was going to put in a right-of-way or anything there. And so we felt like our due diligence to see whether that was going to be used space. So we were very surprised when we did find out that someone was paving.
It changes the conversation, and I've heard it change already to a lot of alleyway conversations.
So it wasn't a corner lot at the time, and now suddenly.
But I'll leave that there.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Michael he's probably who you want to talk to mostly about a lot of this, but we'll answer questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and I do want to thank Alex for all of her time on this and just talking with us and, helping us come to where we are today. As they mentioned, the house a while back started as a two-story house, but narrower footprint. And due to the height, we kind of, comments from Alex, decided to go with more of a one story with a basement, similar to a lot of the other carriage houses in the area. However, one thing that Alex had mentioned many times during our conversations is that in no way did we have to build necessarily a carriage house. We could build it because it's not an accessory dwelling. It is its own lot, and it's a primary residence. So it is kind of an ambiguous place in the language. In fact, under new construction, it talks about that allowing new construction in Montford is something to carry on building in the historic neighborhood and to enable an evolution. It's actually in the code. It says an evolution, so it's not saying that you have to abide by things that's new construction. It also says that it needs to be compatible. It mentions there's a broad range of options to choose from. It says that primary structure should be compatible but differentiated. And in the comments of smaller scale, you know, the first floor is 2,350 square feet. It is a large footprint. When we went from the second 2-story to the 1-story, one thing that Mark and Beth really appreciated from that was their desire for a universal design, something that they can live in, and if they, as they get older, need to use a wheelchair, have the ability to move around their house, have turning radius in the bathroom, and have maneuverability on their main floor, and everything from the garage through the main floor of the house is accessible. We're using 3.0 doors and trying to allow for movement in the house, which engendered a larger footprint. But in total square footage, if you were to look at the footprint of 20 Watauga, the square footage that it lists online is around 3,500 square feet, but that's only taking into account the 2 stories. There's actually effectively a 3rd-story basement. If you go by the requirements to say that our application is a 3,600 square foot house, then you should also assume that 20 Watauga is a 5,300 square foot house. So it's, I just want to make sure that that's clear as we kind of start. Let's see here, that's Alex's. So one thing I wanted to bring up on this particular slide is this is not exactly saying that the back houses are similar to the front houses. This is actually showing you that this slide shows the rear buildings that have been approved for these lots, and it actually shows how different they are in some senses. If you look at 109 Kingsland Alley that was recently approved, it does not share a lot of the characters of 30 Watauga. The 40 Watauga Street has a pretty grand stair, and the clipped gables that are on that are significantly different than the clipped gables that are on 40 Watauga, which have flared out roofs, whereas the one on behind 40 Watauga has straight edges, and the character of the windows is significantly different as well. I'm not saying that any of those are bad additions to those lots, but they also show that they don't have to share all of the qualities of the primary residence. And to that point also, both 109 Kingsland and our property are not on the same lot as the houses that are on 30 and 20 Watauga. They were legally separated through a severance of the property, making them their own properties. In the density study that we did, one thing we were trying to show here is that if you look at the corner of Watauga and Montford, and you see how the closeness of all those buildings and how little green space there is between all of those structures, it's a very dense cluster right on that corner. And if you look at the density along Watauga as we move away from Montford, the space between the buildings becomes larger, and the amount of green space between them is pretty significant, which is maintained by the way the property lines are. The sight lines from Watauga are obscured by conifers. There's some mature conifer trees along the property line between 20 Watauga and 6 Danville Place that obscure the visibility of the new house. And the distance is around 80 feet between the back of 20 Watauga and 6 Danville Place. So this kind of site section here, this doesn't have the amended heights that we have on, let's see if I can pan here. I don't know if I can. But if you look at the height difference, they do appear to be very similar in height. But when you think about the grade, the height of the top of the pitch on 20 Watauga is about 30 some odd feet, and ours from grade is about 20. And on the backside, 20 Watauga is 40 feet, and ours is 30. Ours is 2/3 is the height. It's also in square footage when you take the heated square footage of both bases. It's also about 60% smaller in heated square footage, even if you were to build it out 100%. If you built out ours is 100%, it'd be around, as Alex pointed out, about 3,600. But I argue that if you build out 20 Watauga 100%, it's 5,300 square feet.
Just a quick question, Michael.
Yeah.
There. Is what you're showing here is the first floor? It's about the same as the other house on Watauga.
It's
within a foot or two.
It's a little bit different, but sure.
A little lower.
Yeah, I'd say the 20 Watauga is lower by.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. This is a site set. This is not a. I didn't literally cut the section. I don't have a topographic map of the other house. But if you were to just look at, say, looking at that line and that line there, that's, probably 9 or 10 feet. And this line to this line is 9 or 10 feet. And, we have a roof. And in historic roof forms in Montford, a 6, 7, 8, 12 pitch roof is pretty typical. If I wanted to make this shorter, I'd have to make it a 412 roof, which is not appropriate in this neighborhood. So, and we went with a hip roof, like I know that Alex is saying it's a pyramidal roof. It's a hip. It's a fairly common roof form with the floor plan being close to being a square. It's a pyramid, but it's a hip roof. And if you were to, that's just what the form turns out to be. The reason we went with a hip rather than a gable is most of the carriage houses and other alley structures tend to have hip roofs. They don't have gables on one-story houses. When you do a one-story house, putting a gable on it, I think calls a lot more attention to it than having a more subdued roof form. If I put, like for instance, on the rendering that I handed out, if I put a gable on there, it would make the house look bigger. A hip roof, by sloping the front edge back, when you can look at the rendering that you have in front of you, that house does not look very tall, even though that's it is a tall roof, but the hip drives that upper point back and creates a perspectival illusion of a lower roof. That's what the beauty of a hip roof is that it lowers the height visually of a building. We were looking at the views from Watauga Street. First, just looking at 20 Watauga on the backside. Our house is embedded in the grade. And part of the reason why we have a basement is due to, a visible basement at all, is due to topography. But if you look at this particular house, there's, first off, a lot of fenestration. And it's, they're all double hung windows, 6/1. That's what we were using as a guiding principle with ours, is to match that. Porch details. One thing we are planning to do is use the similar porch details with the columns and the spacing of the balusters that are similar to the front porch of 20 Watauga. Let's see here. If you look, this is the view of 20 Watauga from the edge of our property line. You can see that it's barely visible due to the conifers and other mature trees that are in between that house and our lot. is a view of our site as it currently is. You can see that has the fencing all the way around it. We were actually planning to remove the fence that's along Kingsland and Danville. That's actually not something that we were planning to keep. We were planning to keep the rear yard fence and the side yard fence between the lots that's currently existing, and just to install some gates like of the similar fence material at the building line for a dog run in the back. Let's see here. Go back to see if I can find the. Which one has the point cloud views, Aaron? This one. Okay. So I think that this perspective 2 approach along Danville is a very important slide, because it really does this. So the reason this view looks kind of funky is what we did. We had somebody go out there with a Matterport camera and take a point cloud of the existing site, and then we placed our rendering in the background there, so you can kind of see. See here, it's really hard to see because the house is very far in the distance, but it's very obscured. Like if you're going down Danville, first you're not going to think that this house has anything to do with 20 Watauga. They're 80 feet apart, and there's like fully mature trees all around it, and there's not very many significant trees on the lot currently. We are taking a couple, but the surrounding trees are going to continue to be in part the context. And then this one here, perspective 5, kind of shows you that when you're actually at this corner, these roofs are very similar to each other, and this is an existing carriage house. They're both similar in slope, and that's just kind of the case. You know, this front is on perspective 4. It is a little taller, but then if you compare it to perspective 1, where you're standing next to, and it's somewhat, you know, this house is 10 feet taller than that is, but you know, it's hard to tell from these pictures, but.
Sorry, this is going to probably seem a little off topic, but what was the discussion about the height? Like, why did you go from 2-story to 1-story? Like, what was making the height of your structure so much taller than, I guess, and causing there to be a height?
The 2-story to a 1-story? I think Alex was mainly pointing out that that homes along the alleys are usually 1-story or 1.5-story, not 2-story.
Okay.
I think what I was saying was it's more tied back to the overall size and scale, not specifically saying you can't do a 2-story structure, because there is one that was approved maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if anybody drove down this alley, but it's a weird alley in that it's only been approved halfway on this side and then halfway on the other side. But on the other side, there's a structure that's 2 stories that was approved by the commission like 5 years ago. So I was more so, my feedback was more generally about the size and scale needing to be consistent with other structures around alleyways.
And so that's the main reason why. And then, you know, as to the build out of the site, we actually have a lot of vegetation that we're planning on the site. It's like, yes, it's more formal planting, but a lot of those are low shrubs and perennials. The path in the back is going to be river rock. It's not concrete. We're not wedded to the idea of using snapstone. If you know, we could definitely use a normal, like a mortared stone stair to match something more in context, or we could do a concrete stair. There's lots of concrete stairs in Montford. But in general, there's some grass, some trees, shrubs. We have a driveway going into the garage. The breezeway, I'd be interested to hear everyone's opinions on the breezeway. I think we were just trying to create a covered connection between the garage and the main house, but I don't want to speak for Mark, but I don't know if we'd fall on our sword for it. So yeah,
We're over to your opinion.
yeah, and the only other comment that I'd have about the neighboring property, 109 Kingsland, is yes, it's smaller, but the lot's smaller, and they built all the way up to the property line. If that lot was bigger, they would have built a larger building. And that's, yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from the committee.
Well, I'd just like to make the observation, I'm looking at the density study, and the square that's pointed out as 6 Danville Place, the subject of this application, it looks like a big footprint because it is a square. And the other structures along the alley tend to be more rectangular. But when you look at, if you were to be on that street, on Danville Place, and looking at the elevation of this new structure, it looks like it would be about as wide as some of the other structures I see along the alley. So some of the other structures on the alley might be more like rectangles because of the shape of the lot, but they probably appear, they might appear a more similar size to what you're trying to build. So I'm not, and I think to your point about the square footage, comparing the square footage of 6 Danville Place to 20 Watauga Street, you do have to consider the part that's the basement, because that is part of the square footage. So I think, in a way, the density study is a little bit misleading because we have to consider what the scale of this 6 Danville Place is compared to the things around it.
Well,
It personally doesn't seem too big to me to be on that alleyway, and I don't see that, personally, I don't feel that it looks, when you look at the comparison of other structures along the alleyway to their primary structure on the main street, I don't see that it's so much of a different character. I mean, given the characteristics of the site, so I'm not as bothered by it. The scale nor the fact that it's very subjective, whether how similar it is to the primary structure. It's not like it's a, completely flat-roofed modern structure that would look really out of place.
yeah, I agree.
So I personally, I don't see, I don't have a problem with this application as it's, and when we're as far as discussing the scale of the house and the appearance or the character of the house in this neighborhood. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. I'd like to add one other thing that I didn't bring up, and that's directly behind, I can't remember the address of it, but there's an apartment building, that rectangle that's right below it, that's 8,700 square feet, and it has 12 bedrooms, and it's an apartment complex. And yeah, but I just wanted to bring that up as well, that, it's interesting. There is quite a variety of buildings in this particular part of Montford.
I think I tend to agree with you on the size and scale. And looking at the features that are similar, it employs banks and pairs of 9/1 windows. The entrance is designed in a way that it has, a main entrance flanked by individual 9/1 windows. It employs the Montford brackets on the porch. I get the distinction. I appreciate the distinction between a hipped and a pyramidal roof. Yes, they are both hips. But you're right. It is a byproduct of the footprint. And I think that changing the pitch will make it look more modern, because mid-20th century buildings tended to have lower pitched roofs. Yeah. To me, it is similar enough, and I am hesitant myself to say I think it should be more similar, because I think it is similar enough to meet the guideline for compatibility. Are there other features that, one might could comment on? Sure, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners have other opinions.
I don't necessarily have any comments about the design. I think, the design does have enough similarity to the structures around it. I think that's great. And looking at the guidelines of new construction for primary structures, it does say that new primary structures located along alleys, and it doesn't even say on the same site. This just says along alleys, behind existing structures or in other locations where the original historic structures were smaller. Where the original historic structures were smaller in scale as documented on Sanborn maps or historical photographs should be smaller in scale in keeping with historic context unless reconstructing a historical structure based on accurate documentation. So, and right above that, it's also talking about how the design of new structures need to be compatible in height, roof, form, footprint, and massing, things like that, just little areas where I can see how the overall footprint of the home. I understand that it being a square versus a rectangle is probably throwing it off a bit, but that's kind of the footprint of it as a whole. Whether, I don't know if just changing the footprint to be a rectangle is really what's going to change, I guess, my mind on this. I understand that on the main road that all of these homes are much bigger, but that's where I guess, they got snubbed on the side of it's considered an alleyway, and it stands out quite a bit to me when you're looking at the other structures in the alleyway. It doesn't stand out when you're comparing it to the other homes. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Are you referring to the density plan?
Yes.
So on the density plan, 6 Danville Place, the footprint of that appears more similar to the structures on the main road.
Yeah.
Okay, but what I'm saying is this is a diagram, and what we're concerned about is what the appearance of this new structure is in relation to the others. And to me, it looks like it's a lower scale. It's not as high as the primary structure. And I think, the view from the facade, from looking at the facade is what's going to be the reality of how you experience the structure. This is just a diagram. And I think we have to remember that. It doesn't mean that because there's a square there, it's the same size as the primary structures.
I also, at some point in the future, this is just can we bookmark this discussion and come back to it later, about the difference between size and scale. We often use those two words together, but size and scale are very different. You can have 2 one-story buildings that are roughly the same size, but they are of very different scales. And it has to do with how the features are treated. To me, the scale of this building is consistent with the historic scale of its primary structure, in front of it, as well as the other new and historic buildings, in its vicinity. And that's because of the way it is designed. So the scale of this building, I think, is consistent with the scale of the surrounding buildings. The size of the building is a little different. And, you know, we look at size in both height and square footage and, you know, width and depth, and volume. But to your point, you know, looking at some of the other structures, yes, that, you know, they might have a similar volume. It's broken up a bit more. You know, we've got some T-shaped footprints down there to the south. But I think that with the way it employs the pyramidal roof or hipped roof, and the way the elevations are detailed, the size and scale relative to its surrounding, both the size and scale to its surroundings are congruous.
Well said. I would just add that even looking at elevation drawings is a little misleading because, you know, you're really experiencing the building from the ground. And what you're seeing, in reality, you're seeing a perspective, and the hip roof kind of disappears. But it's very dominant in the renderings because you're looking at a two-dimensional diagram of that building.
Yes.
So
It's true.
I think we just have to be cognizant of how it's really going to appear in reality. And I agree with Annie that I believe the scale of this, which, you know, is a very important point, is appropriate for the location. And I also agree with Annie that it's similar enough in character to what we're comparing it to, which is the primary structure, you know, for lack of a better description, on the same site, or 20 Watauga Street.
But can I just ask, like with the scaling thing, like even how it's saying like these are supposed to be, like it's different for alleyways. And that's what I'm trying to get at is I understand the footprint of this home matches primary structures all around it, but this is considered an alleyway, and that's where the footprint is, you know, I guess in my mind, not matching up with what is around it. The alleyway structures are quite a bit smaller. And I'm just saying maybe, I understand like even if we made it into more of a rectangle, like maybe that would change my outlook on it. But,
I'm just going to repeat what I said before, that I believe that the scale of this building is appropriate to the location and, you know, is more similar to the other buildings along this alleyway, if you will, than it is to the large building. And I think we have to not just look at this diagram. I think we have to look at the photographs, we have to look at the renderings, and just imagine what it would look like in real life.
I'm looking at the site plan, and I'm curious, Exhibit D, I think the footprint is very large, and it, you know, it doesn't follow the guideline about the retention of green space. So I'd love to hear what other commissioners think about that. And then going back to, you know, number 5, again, it's not smaller, like it says in the guidelines. I think there's some room for interpretation, but I don't think this house generally follows the guidelines.
I think, can I just add something to kind of build on what Commissioner McDonald was saying? Sure, I think obviously size and scale are two different things, but I think they do go hand in hand when we're having these discussions. And I think another word I would just maybe use here is secondary. Like that's typically what the structures along alleyways were. They were secondary structures, right? They were mostly used for garages and these secondary spaces that are ancillary to the primary structures on the primary rights of way. So I share Commissioner Gorman's concerns about the overall size still. So that's just.
Can we pull up the comparison of, I think it was called precedent images number 2 or something?
This one? This.
So again, it's a little, I believe it's a little misleading because what we're seeing for 60 Anvil Pace place is an elevation in 2 dimensions and not a true perspective. But I guess if I look at this, what you passed out on paper, and the photograph of 20 Watauga Street, I think it's to me, it's pretty clear that this is a smaller scale than that building. To me, that looks pretty grand compared to this.
Maria, I would agree with that. It is subordinate. It is 1 story tall, banked into a hillside with an exposed lower level in one area. The building at 20 Watauga is 2 stories tall. Some might say it's 2.5, but it's clearly at least 2 stories tall. So to me, it is subordinate. It is diminutive because it is 1 story tall. And I think you're right about the perspective versus the flat on elevation. Would I personally design a building that looked like that? Would I want my house on Danville to have a square footprint? No, I wouldn't. I don't think want my house on Danville to have a square footprint. I would probably want it to have a rectangular footprint. But that's why I think this meets the guidelines, regardless of my personal opinion about how I might design it. I hear your point about green space, but I do think it because of the size of the lot, there is, I think, sufficient green space. I personally, and I respect people have different opinions. I think that there is enough green space retained. There are other new buildings that have had less green space retained.
Can I add a comment to the green space? One thing that I do find, it's like I also don't want to have to kind of have my cake and eat it too, but there is kind of this comparison of this being subordinate to 20 Watauga when it comes to it being subordinate to it. But when you talk about green space, I'm not allowed to consider all the green space that's between the 2 buildings. And if you look at 109 Kingsland, it takes up almost its entire lot as well, and it was recently approved within the last year. And one of the reasons it was approved was because of the distance between the spaces and the amount of green space that is preserved between the spaces and the mature trees that are on the site. So our home is not going to change the character of the green space in that alley. It will obviously add a building. Yes, the footprint is large, but the way it is, the way it was designed with the hip roof was intentional to pull that perspective back and make it have a smaller scale from the front. And again, the reason for the footprint size is a lot of driven by universal design. When you have a master on a main floor and you have a bathroom that needs to have maneuverability in it for the future, the bathroom inherently gets bigger. A lot of the design elements get bigger, and it does push it out. So we try to minimize the view of the building by designing that. And we are also using 2 different materials on the exterior. We're doing the shakes for the main floor and then a pebble dash stucco on the base, mainly to emphasize that it's a 1-story house. And that follows a lot of the character of many historic homes in and around Asheville, not just Montford, but if you look all over Asheville, if you look at houses that are historic, the main floors are usually having the wood finishes, and then the basement level is usually stucco, and that differentiates the lower quarters from the upper, and it's an architectural kind of delineation that is done on buildings. And that also will help. It will also help break up the scale, because if the whole thing, it's like if you look at, I need to go back to the picture of the, I'm wondering which one it would be in. This was a good one right here. If I just can keep looking up there, I can see it better on here. Watuga. If you look at 20 Watuga, because it has siding on all 3 levels, that house looks huge. If you really go to that site and stand by it, that house is incredibly tall. And part of the reason it looks incredibly tall is because the entire building is using the same material. If they had differentiated the base of that with a pebble dash stucco, that house would actually look smaller.
I think it's a really incredible lot that you guys have found to allow a footprint this large. I will say, being a real estate broker.
Okay.
I was going to go back to some of the concerns that you had in your staff report that we haven't touched on, which was, you mentioned that you feel like the chimney might be too large. And I was going to just ask you, you know, what your concern was with that.
I guess it probably, I can't recall if I like looked hard at the examples that are on the end of Danville Place that are the larger accessory structures in the area, but I just feel like it presents as pretty large chimney, like right on the street, but whatever, I'm not gonna take issue with that. My primary concern is the overall size.
The overall
and scale.
size.
Yeah, I feel like the footprint of this structure is, if you look at my comparison study, the closest thing is a two-story accessory structure that's 2,347 square feet. There's a 1.5-story structure that's 1,368 square feet, another 1.5-story structure that's a little over 1,000, and one that's 1,200. And I just feel like this footprint is not even close to any of those. And so I'm I guess a little bit taken aback that, I don't know, I'm interested to hear what some of the other commissioners have to say about that, because to me we can work out any of the design things, and they may not be a thing of concern to the commissioners, whereas I might nitpick something. But I think that if there are other folks that have concerns about the scale, I think it would be, or size and scale, I think it would be helpful to voice those, and if you don't have them, then I think it would be helpful to know that before we get into means on design things.
I am going to echo that concern based on item 5 from primary structures in where it just talks about the alleys and the size. And I think the roof form it's one thing on a 20 by 20 building across the street, but when it comes in at, what's your width?
I'm not exactly sure what my width is off.
60?
No, I don't think it's 60. I don't think
Something.
our
Anyway,
site is that big, but yeah.
The roof,
it's like it might be.
the roof form,
Yeah.
and I know there's there can be limited view of it, but other people, it sets a precedent, so it doesn't mimic anything nearby or hearken to things nearby at that scale. And it kind of creates something that could be in Lakeview, or it could be in somewhere. And this is different. This is Montford. And there's nothing wrong with Lakeview. There's nothing wrong with Hall Creek. But I think there's a roof form and a pattern to the homes on the alley and on whatever street, on the way the roof form looks. And you've kind of painted yourself, I think, with the shape. That's where you got to, I don't know. I'm not an architect. But I think the size has led you down a path that's sort of bumping into a couple of things. And that's where I am on it, based on the standards on 5 and 8.
One other, it's like I get that particular section there, but I would like to say that, as with many parts of the HRC guidelines, they are very ambiguous, and the word smaller is a very interesting term. I don't, it's like it doesn't specifically state a percentage or thing. So it is very much a subjective guideline. The chimney, for instance, the reason why the chimney is that high and that size is because that's physically how a chimney.
No,
I know, but like I'm just saying, like certain
width.
things do kind of just lend themselves to how they are when they're built. And yeah, if we shrunk it down, sure, but I don't know. I think, you know, I'm designing this for my clients, and they have specific programmatic things that they would like in their house, and I'm abiding as close to the HRC guidelines as possible. And from a legal standpoint, I find it very hard to support a maximum square footage or saying that this has to be within 10 to 20% of another building
We have
nearby.
that
I know,
specifically.
but I'm
hold
just
on.
saying.
In accessory dwelling units, we say specifically
Yes.
what the percent
True.
of massing, and that's
in
a
an
little
accessory.
fuzzy too.
Yeah.
But so it is part of the application,
Mhm. Yeah.
and I understand, and I'm just
Yeah.
telling you that that there is a voice that's saying that by the shape, by the massing, by the size, that you're pushing up against some of the standards in a way that's a little push. And that's what you're doing for your client, and I appreciate it. I think it's a beautiful looking house. But we have to kind of qualify why we're pushing back a little bit
Sure.
on some of these items.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I just want to clarify too and I think I tried to communicate this when we met, that the way that the standards are written is subjective because every site and property and house are different.
Yes.
And like, what is the context along this section of alleyway may not be the same context of the alleyway of Cumberland Alley or
Sure.
any other alley. So they're written in that way to lend some flexibility for both interpretation from your side and the commission side. So that is, while it's hard, it makes it harder, it is like actually meant to be flexible to recognize those differing site conditions, et cetera. And I want to just go back to Commissioner, I'm sorry, I'm so tired, but
I'm there.
to your question about the fireplace, or chimney, I was just like revisiting that in my mind, and it was the primary structure doesn't have an exterior fireplace,
does.
and I was looking at like the other accessory structures, and I think maybe some of them have.
20 Watauga does, and as does 30 Watauga if you go to the west side.
West side, okay, thanks. Yeah, it just feels like maybe for even though it's a new primary structure, it is sort of like this weird line where it is an accessory onto the alleyway, so it's secondary. And so that was kind of where I was coming from on that note. But again, I don't want to get in the weeds on design and stuff until we sort out this larger conversation about the alley structure.
I think.
So where do we stand? Oh, someone
Well, I was
else
going to say,
wants to
I'm going to
speak.
contribute on the size conversation. I think I've thought about this enough. I see the data from the table, and it does seem big. However, in looking at the renderings and all that, I don't know, there's perfect situation of the site and everything. It seems like it fits in there okay. So I'm going to side with my fellow commissioners over there that I think the size of it is not an issue for me, even though the numbers stand out. But the way that I interpret the guidelines and all that, I think it complies with that for me. And go with your points on the staff report, that the porches are something, I think you have done yourself a favor with the square footprint, right? Because you have maximized your square footage for the amount of building facade that's exposed, which is why it feels okay. But the porches and the regularity of these voids in the middle and this like 9 square thing that's going on there does feel a little foreign. So I'm interested actually in my fellow commissioners on their thoughts on the porches and the kind of that form there, because that was brought up in the staff report as well.
I've been puzzling over those side porches. And Xander, something you said just now kind of, I think, solidified it for me. You know, we look at this from an aerial view or, you know, as a square on a map, but when you look at it in real life, those porches are going to break up the elevation. They're going to break up the mass. They're going to create depth in the middle of the elevation. The block, you know, it is a square in that comparison study, in that massing study, but it really is actually kind of H-shaped with those porches. And, or even a weird H with the front porch because of how it's recessed. And thank you for bringing up the porches, because I'd kind of forgotten about them in the larger discussion. And I think for me, the porches actually help break up the massing. If that was a flat wall, it would look even more, it would look even larger. And I think that the porches help mitigate the effect of the square footprint created by the roof and the foundation.
I meant to add to my comments before that I would be a proponent of separating the garage from the rest of the house by getting rid of that covered walkway. I know it would be very convenient, but I think that does help bring the mass of the building down and feel more appropriate for the alleyway. And then you kind of have you know, secondary structure, tertiary structure, if you will, to like the overall site, which I think kind of is neat and appropriate, kind of as like a little model. So yeah, those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's like, I was reading the garage guidelines again when I was rereading through the HRC guidelines, and I kind of agree that the attached roof doesn't really work. It's actually, as many things that are very up to interpretation, it actually says that the garage cannot be attached to the main building, which kind of implies that that roof shouldn't be there. So I think that we can probably remove that roof.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with that. I mean, you have a lot, you've built out, that's a lot of house for that lot. But I understand you're trying to help your client, but and I think Annie's point about the garage, I mean, the porches does help too. But I think that long line right there, I think if there was even more greenery instead of just a big walkway would help lighten things up a little bit. That is a big structure. There isn't anything else that's that size on that alley. I mean, it's big.
There's a picture of the connection. I was going to ask the commission a question. If we remove that, I think you brought it up. If we remove that connection, is there anything allowed, like a trellis? Am I saying that right? You know, just
some kind of cover.
Covered. I don't know the terms. Like, is there something that's allowed in the middle of there, over it, where it's not covered, but
like some kind of structure, you mean?
Yeah. I'm going to say that.
You want it covered?
It's more slab.
An arbor.
Is that what it is? Yeah, Would that
I'm just taking Will's word.
Or
I think we know what you're talking about.
okay. Sorry, I don't know.
I'm gonna let you keep looking for words.
Thank you for bailing me out.
The word you're looking for is pergola.
Pergola. So would that be yes, no? I'm just curious. If we remove the connection, would a pergola, would that be appropriate, or would that be still kind of considered connected?
I don't know of any pergolas there, do you? And then,
The bed and breakfast setting, but we'd have to see it. It's
Yeah.
not with sort of.
I'm thinking that for the purpose of this one, let's say we're removing it, and if they want to add a pergola later, we can go forward with asking for a pergola.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's zero, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Try not to get wet when you park your car.
We'll just install some industrial fans to blow away the rain.
Are there any more questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you have enough, I mean, I'm counting the no's on scale versus the okay on size scale. It's 3-3 clear, 3 for, 3 against. There weren't enough, at least I'm writing. Just know, but if you vote, if you are voting for it as is, you have to have a majority vote to approve it. I think that was an official modification, removing that connection structure, so, right, that was an official modification. But other than that,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah.
they put you on the spot, I think we, I don't know, we heard from you, might be the only one, and not as clear on, for that question, Commissioner Bowman.
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at the
Well,
figure
we
ground
should
study,
need
and I
public
think
comment.
that
I know, but you're still
Okay.
commenting.
with it being on a corner lot and with there being so much green space around it now, if any of these other, places that are primary structures decide to start subdividing even more, then there'll be new conversations had. But personally, I feel okay with it, and I think that the standards do allow for some evolution, and we have to, what they're trying to do seems reasonable to me.
I agree with that. I don't have a problem with the scale. I think the move of like removing like the roof above, like the connector roof, is a good one. That's where I stand.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Close the floor for public comment. That's what you count.
Do you need a willing motion maker?
I mean, I don't.
Are we there?
Do we
Is
even
that
have,
everything?
can like,
If you're making a motion to approve, you have to create your own reason, so you should have a set of standards next to you, I guess, because
Oh.
I didn't draft anything.
This was, yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we will need for conditions also.
I just navigated away from where the guidelines are. Damn it. Anyway, what do I get? Oh, thank you. Okay. Does the template? Okay.
but I mean, so are we only approving, denying the scale of this, the size of this structure, right?
Somebody's making a motion to approve the building.
And that, including all the design, everything.
No, that's a good point, thank you. We haven't gone over this materials and all the specs, so I'm might be a little premature.
Yeah. One thing on the certificate of appropriateness summary that's on the first page here, it says install 4-foot wood post and wire fence around perimeter property. That could be revised to just existing fence. We're not adding a new fence around the property.
But you would be reinstalling the fence, correct?
We're leaving the existing fence.
You're gonna have to take part of it down.
We're removing the ones that are along Kingsland and that are along Danville. Those two.
Just temporarily.
No, we're not putting them back.
It might be helpful to see that, like, actually drawn on the site plan and clarify. 'Cause
Okay.
it's not-
But you can, it's like if you'd like to add it to the thing, we're going to remove the fence that's along the streets.
Sure. Because you said you're gonna retain what's there for the rear. For
Yeah, the existing fence will retain and the existing division between the properties on Kingsland. And the the pedestrian doors will be wood doors. And the woods, the posts and brackets, and there will be similar to 20 Watauga. I don't know the specific dimensions, but I think they're close to 10 by 10, but I don't know if I want to say 10 by 10 right now.
So I'm a bit confused on what else we're approving here. So there's material specifications, but in that document, there's just shingles, a picture of a carriage house, and a light, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's the,
And
Yeah, there's all the stuff that's listed out in that staff report that's outstanding will have to be conditions if you're all fine with the staff reviewing this.
yeah, and we did show the elevations of the accessory structure. We corrected the west primary structure to show the pedestrian door. The porch railing detail, we can definitely draw one, but it will be similar to what's in 20 Watauga. The brick sample, we haven't selected it yet, but we were looking at both the chimney on 20 Watauga and the chimney on 30 Watauga, but, you know, we can review that with Alex. The tree species, I believe, have been noted on the site plan. We don't have manufacturer specifications for the siding, trim, roofing, doors, windows, lighting, chimney cap, and mechanical, but we can definitely submit those at a later date.
I just want to ask about the mechanical unit. It's shown on the floor plans as that little area adjacent to that stone wall that's between the structures. But then on the landscape plan or the site plan, there's landscaping shown in that location. So if you don't have that identified yet, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
We just need to take it out of the application, and you can just apply for
Yeah.
that via administrative
Sure.
approval down whenever you're ready.
Yeah, that sounds good, because,
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of,
My comment about the drain area and the level spreader makes sense. Like, I just need to know what that there wasn't that much information on the site plan about, like, is that gonna be, it looked like there was maybe different paving material around the
Yeah.
drain area, et cetera. So I just wanna make sure that.
yeah, we can, you're talking about the back there where it has the dashed blue, go back to the site plan.
Yeah, it looks like
Oh,
we're,
revised drawings, okay, I see what you're saying.
yeah, along I guess
Hold
that's
on,
the west property line.
Here's the revised site plans that were submitted today, so.
Yeah, so if you zoom in on the, like, right to the left of the driveway.
Yeah, you're
the
talking about,
drain.
yeah, sorry, this thing. How was that? You're talking about this over here?
Yeah, and the drain is right there next to the driveway, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it looks like that's a different kind of paving material.
it's probably gravel, like probably rock. Usually that's weed, but I can definitely get a detail or a photograph.
Yeah, it would just be helpful to know exactly what
Yep,
is happening there.
okay. And I think that we did locate on the site plan, that right here is where the mechanical equipment is shown, right behind the garage. Can you all see that? Alex,
I'm sorry.
can you see
Trying to do too many things at one
yeah,
time.
the mechanical equipment behind the garage was updated on the most recent.
And that'll be both for the primary and accessory structure?
I believe so, but, you know, why don't we leave it off for now? We'll figure it out. Because
That seems to make more sense, because
I think you can get that far, but yeah, it's a good question. And the trash, they were just gonna keep their cans inside their garage.
We'll edit, we'll edit the motion.
Parents will appreciate that.
Yeah.
Consideration.
Yeah.
That's, I know, Annie, you could just read it aloud. You don't have to type in. Are you trying to type into the document?
I'm writing it down so that I sound intelligent when I actually say it. So I wanted something to read, but I may just have to make it up on the fly.
You could just read from the design standards.
That's what I'm gonna
and then-
do.
And we'll just type it in as
Okay.
we hear it, so.
Okay, I'll talk really slow when I get to that part.
The steps were changed to concrete instead of snapstone.
You guys didn't talk about when we got there.
Yeah.
Is snapstone real stone? You guys, I had to Google it. It's just been cut a certain, with a guillotine cutter?
No, it's rough.
It's kind of rough, but it's usually pretty square.
But it's real, and that's good.
It's something that we haven't approved in the past when it was presented.
Gotcha.
So do we want to?
Will materials and specs that are submitted, as part of a condition, will those come back to the board, or will those go, Alex, to you as staff?
If you want those to come back to you, you'll have to get them to continue the application.
Okay, so we'll just have them go to you.
You guys are fine with me reviewing all of the things.
It feels like there's a lot of things that were not decided and only one thing that was sort of really discussed throughout this.
Yeah.
This is a fair point, that there's a lot that's outstanding as far as details are concerned. I'm inclined to make a motion to approve it, but I don't know that, Alex, it's fair to you if we say administratively approve all the things.
It's not typical.
Yeah.
New construction projects usually take at least 2 meetings, in part because of this, because a lot of times there is some kind of like bigger thing we gotta figure out, like the siding or size or scale or whatever, and then the details have to be.
Yeah, it feels unfinished.
We would be okay with coming back to present the material specifications if other things can be approved for certificate.
Can you revise the building elevations with the breezeway connection modification
Sure.
as well?
That would just be a continuance to
Yeah, I
the
think-
next meeting for the whole thing.
For one
One
month, to
month.
continue it for 1 month.
So you have all the material, you have
Yeah.
all the.
So we
materials
feel
and
like we
revised
have everything we
designs
need,
Okay,
because it
based
feels
on the feedback
unfinished.
you've gotten.
sure. Yeah, it's like, provided the feedback, that, yeah, we can definitely get more specifications.
Just, Mike, just to let you know, the submittal deadline for the next meeting is the 22nd, so.
Okay.
we've got a couple of weeks.
All right.
In between that meeting too, it depends.
Yeah, and you can always, if you request a date
Yeah.
specific, like a June meeting, and
We
you're
do.
like, oh, we need more
With their
time, you
agreement.
just let me know, and then we can come to the commission and let them know that you
Okay.
are requesting another continuance. And
Yeah.
then we have to come and ask
Yeah.
yourselves.
Okay. They're just visiting from out of town, so we're just trying to like.
Okay.
So
We're gonna-
you have to say.
You have to say that you want to continue.
Well, I want approval, but I guess continuance would be okay. Sure.
So you want
We
to
will take a continuance to the,
June.
to the June meeting.
yeah, for the June. Yeah, we'll ask for a continuance to the June meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
So move to continue this application to the June meeting.
A second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. See you next month.
Well, I'm sorry you had to stay this late, but I'm going to dinner.
It's okay.
We're not done yet.
Yeah. Thank you. Enjoy your visit.
You can hand these in and we can hand them, they'll be in the materials
Okay.
next time.
business items. One that I think I forgot to add to the agenda copy that's in your folder, but one is just a note that the Griffin Awards are on Thursday, the 23rd of this month. Sue is going to attend, and Will, I think you'll be there too, correct? And then the Preservation Society has offered to cover the cost of 2 commissioners to attend. So, Will, I don't know.
No, I have tickets.
Huh? You get a free pass, right? Because you.
This
Yeah.
is a hot mic.
So I was just gonna say probably fine if there's another person who wants
There's
to
another
attend.
ticket.
I would love to go, if possible.
Okay. So that is at the Hideaway on Broadway at 5:30 on the 23rd. Last year they extended the invite to the entire commission, but it sells out, so it's just kind of, it's a lot to do that for all of us. So, anyways, that's just a one note on that, and obviously that's where the HRC award will be presented to the awardees this year. And then the only other thing we need to take care of today, and any other things that you guys might want to talk about, is the executive committee nominations. So, like we talked about last time, the existing slate of officers was put forth by Maria and Xander as the nominating committee, and so you all just need to make a motion to appoint the slate of officers for the upcoming year, which starts on July 1. Is that correct? Just a motion to?
I think so. Does somebody have
The
the slate and whatever was
Is there a
nominated
motion,
last month?
is there a motion template?
We don't really have, it's kind
Okay.
of, we've never really had like a formalized way we did that. Or
You might just want to
specifically.
repeat what you said, so the nominations on the table are so-and-so and so for the officers, and then take a vote.
So would you like either Xander or myself to do it, since we were on the nominating committee?
Yeah.
Okay. So do I have to name the full names of all the commissioners? 'Cause
That are being nominated as officers?
yeah.
Well, probably, but they can probably help you.
Okay, all
I
right.
assume that you've checked with them and they've accepted that they will be, okay.
My understanding is that they have a bit based on, I think Alex, you mentioned that.
Do you want me to write, I mean, I know you know all their
I can
names.
go ahead, I can say something very general, and you can tell me if it's okay. All right. My understanding is that, I thought, Alex, that you had checked with the commissioners and they were all okay with remaining, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I move to make a motion to continue the members of the existing executive committee, the 4 members, into the next year with their appointments beginning on July 1st of this year and continuing for another year. And those commissioners being Ms. Sue, what's her last name? Oliva, Mr. Will
Sue Oliver for chair.
Hornaday. Yes, Sue Oliva for chair, Will Hornaday for vice chair. Who's the second? Amy Moxley for second vice chair, and Sarah Gross
Yeah.
for third vice chair.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, okay.
All right. And just a heads up, since we're all here, that there's so many of you today, that Maria's and Xander's last meetings with us will be June.
Aw.
So, one more. We're sad to lose both of you. But appreciate your service.
Yeah,
of
thank
course.
you.
There was something that I heard from a community member that it would be helpful if there was a district map on the HRC site
There's definitely a map on our site.
to say where the district boundaries are. They said they had to go into the guideline, the standards, and go to the page. It's on the, okay, good. That was easy.
You can just give them my contact if they need help locating it, but we created a GIS like a map specifically for the districts and landmarks.
So that our home development services department can be sure to read it.
Well,
That's one of them, that's what started.
Yeah, the historic district layers are in our regular GIS that everyone uses, but then we created a different one that's just the historic resources stuff, so.
And Janice, can you give us any kind of an update on the wall situation?
Well, there isn't an official update. I don't know if all of you know by now that, as I briefly said, now this is the slippery slope.
I know,
So as I
exactly.
briefly said to this person who says, why is that wall still there? So that if you're denied, you can appeal to the Superior Court. And they did appeal, and we filed the record, meaning the city filed everything that was decided. And that's what the court is supposed to work with. And the question is always, were the standards followed? The attorney for the applicant then exercised the right that's in the statutes under quasi-judicial procedures that says a governing body can decide to settle any quasi-judicial decision. It doesn't give any more guidance. It doesn't say what settlement means. Usually in legal cases, settlement means, oh, somebody was fired and they want X amount of compensation, and so you're arguing about money. Clearly, we're arguing about either it stays or goes away or whatever. They went into closed session at the city council as they're allowed to do. It's closed session because they're getting advice from the city attorney. I was not in the closed session, but as the city attorney, he was saying, what kind of case, what kind of risk is there, what do they think? And, basically it was up to them. He took a very neutral, as his position, very neutral position to say, though, that everything had been followed correctly by the HRC in his opinion, and reading our findings of fact. And the council did decide to propose a settlement. I am not at liberty to say what that was. The applicant's attorney has not yet accepted it, so and if they don't accept it, then it has to go to court. But then the only other thing to know is that this is a joint commission, so it also does need to go to the Board of County Commissioners. That would also be in a closed session, and we've had indication that the county commissioners, without knowing much details, that the county commissioners would probably follow suit with whatever the city council had proposed, but we don't know that yet. So that's where it stands. I can't tell you what was the settlement offer, because it hasn't been accepted.
When it is accepted, then that gets publicized and, we are informed.
Well, as part of the public records law, it says a closed session becomes, what happened in that closed session becomes public record once the decision is made. The reason for keeping it secret has gone away, and it needs to be recorded at a public hearing. The details are up to how council wants to give the details. You would, this commission, anybody would be able to publicly request the meeting minutes from that closed session.
I've already done that.
But they won't release the meeting minutes until the decision is made.
Right.
So these are a couple of steps, and we've had conversations about what can the HRC do, and it's probably going to be more of a, if this happens, and it's really, we'll see what the reaction is of the historic districts, because you might get somebody like the woman who is like, I know we didn't follow the standards, and I don't think that means the standards should go away. I mean, and as Sue has explained, and your hands are really tied, so I think it's also perhaps a misunderstanding of the process that you're required to follow, that you don't have a lot of leeway. This is not the kinds of decisions that council typically makes are legislative, meaning they can take whatever input they want and think about it, what's fair, what's not. You have to base these standards on what the adopted standards are, and obviously after 4 meetings, you gave a lot of time to it and really deliberated, and so we'll see where this ends up.
And you said that it's presented at a public hearing, so is that?
It will be on a consent agenda. It will
Okay.
say, it will be just a line item that says a settlement was made in the case of X, and it might say what it was.
Okay.
And only council can decide to pull a matter off of the consent to discuss it more closely.
Okay.
And I would say if the public, if neighborhood associations call in, when we know that's going to go unsaid, we really want more information. Some council member might be willing to say, I'd like to discuss this. But
Thank you.
this has not happened before. This is something that I guess I've talked to other attorneys because I said, I think this is a terrible precedent, but they're thinking, other attorneys, litigators particularly outside of this city, saying they always had the right to do that. I said, yeah, but now it's written there, like it's you could always probably settle anything you wanted, but for it to be pulled out just in the past couple of years, did this line get added to the quasi-judicial procedures? And if anybody wants, I've shared with some of you what the statute is on the settlement offer, which is not really an offer, but is not, I can tell you, it's not what the council agreed to, the letter, which wasn't really an offer. So.
Thank you for that update.
You're welcome.
And I would just update too, I know Annie talked to our CLG coordinator, but I've also talked to our SHPO staff multiple times. So they're looped in and understand the serious concern around this issue, this becoming a much broader issue for preservation statewide. So yeah, I don't know where this will go in terms of the larger conversation, but I just wanted you all to know that we are in contact with the SHPO on this issue. So.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, I also would, I want you all to feel supported too. I think that's certainly we can all share in the frustration that that the HRC decision might not play out in the way that it in the way that it would in the before times, maybe before. I mean, I guess like you said, they could always elect to settle, but it seemed more like, I don't know, it was more so it would go to the Board of Adjustment and it would just play out there. So this is definitely new territory. So I'm sorry if there are those that feel like this is not a fun situation.
Livid. I know everybody wanted to go to court and watch the case. And we have a really good litigator, so I'm confident.
Yeah.
7:41,
Yep.
close it.
Yep.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Again.